This is the Friday, March 26, 2021 Board of Directors meeting for SANDAG. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as a reminder for members of the public wishing to speak on the items before us today, please raise your hand once the presentation for the item has started so that the clerk can make sure to call on you. We will start now with non-agenda comments. And I understand that we have a new advisory member joining us today, the new Executive Director of Navy Region Southwest, Mr. Dennis Keck. Mr. Keck, we have a deep and long-standing partnership with the U.S. military in the San Diego region, and we are so pleased to welcome you to the SANDAG board today. Would you like to say a few words?
I would. Good morning, Chair Blakespeare, members of the SANDAG board and agency colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I'd like to start by reaffirming the Navy's commitment to collaboration with our community partners and to strengthening relationships throughout the San Diego region. As agency leaders, we all recognize the importance of cooperation and partnership as foundations that allow us to pursue our shared goals. Examples of our positive working relationship include efforts to construct state-of-the-art facilities for NAVWAR at Naval Base Point Loma in Old Town, possibly with a transit center or central mobility hub, working together on the regional plan with SANDAG and the community, and actively working to expand Navy TIP ridership to incentivize our military and civilian workforce to explore alternative commuting options. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts. I look forward to building on the Navy's close relationship with SANDAG, our agency partners, and community members. Thank you, Chair Blakespeare.
Well, thank you. Welcome. I know we have one member of the public with a hand up. And if any board members would like to make a comment, please put your hand up and we'll go to the public comment, and then I'll come back to Maris Solis.
Thank you, Chair. We actually have two hands up now. The first from Chris Sotomayor, followed by Madison Coleman. Chris, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and begin whenever you're ready.
Hey folks, good morning. Chris Sotomayor from Mid-City Can. I want to start off today, folks, by thanking you so much for your intentionality in listening to your community when it comes to some of our requests around transportation justice and environmental justice and the RTP. We really feel like there's been some intentionality in hearing our requests, so we're super excited about that and continuing to collaborate. With that said, I want to quickly highlight for you folks the importance of the inclusion of TAY, transitional age youth, 18 to 24, and your consideration of youth opportunity passes in the RTP. So I've heard it been said, I've heard that our YOP in the past has been referred to as a handout. I often hear the argument that what kind of young person over the age of 18 needs that kind of support. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get it together. So I want to talk to you folks today as a young person who rode public transit until they saved enough money to buy their first car at the age of 25. I cannot stress for you folks the importance of having accessible and affordable public transportation when you're a young adult. You know, even pre-pandemic, young people were not leaving home at as high of a rate as previously. They're also not getting their driver's license at the same rate as they were before. So we know for a fact that our young people are staying at home more. We know for a fact that they're not driving. So if the intention in including subsidies for riders in the RTP is to address the community holistically and to address the family unit holistically, then you have to consider folks over the age of 18, right? And we know that folks usually around till that age of 24 are somewhat dependent on their families, are living together, and are nowhere near the income bracket that would allow them to access transportation for themselves. It's just not realistic in the economy that we live in. And in the inclusion of TAY, of folks 18 to 24 in the RTP isn't just, you know, MTS and the city of San Diego saying that they support youth, right? But it's also a move toward progress for this city. It's also like a really tangible and really accessible step that San Diego can take as a whole to say, we are intentionally moving toward equity. So thank you folks again so much for your time and intentionality.
Thank you very much. And next will be Madison Coleman. Madison, you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Awesome. Chris, I'm glad to hear you on this call. Good morning, Chair Blakespear. I hope that I pronounced your name right. And board, this is Madison with Climate Action Campaign, here to comment on item 10 of today's consent agenda, the proposed fiscal year.
Madison, I'm so sorry to cut you off. Actually, this public comment period is for non-agenda items. If you'd like to speak on item 10, we'll take comments for that a bit later.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Buenos dias, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So earlier this week, I participated in the CalCog Regional Leadership Forum, and CalCog is a statewide coalition of council of governments, and it was really interesting to hear from folks like us that serve on boards of regional agencies from across California. And on Monday, we got to hear from the chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee, Laura Friedman, and her priorities for balancing transportation with the state's housing and environmental goals. And on Tuesday, I was so pleased to hear and see SANDAG headlining two of the presentations. The first was on resiliency. Anna Lowe from our SANDAG presented on the San Diego Climate Collaborative, on the amazing partnership we have with them, our local jurisdictions, and our stakeholders to incorporate resiliency into planning and projects. The second one was where Hassan joined a lively discussion with the director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research about what a successful state and regional partnership looks like. It was really clear from the go that our agency received, recognition from these panels and throughout the conference, and that we are truly leading the way and an important player at the table in Sacramento, as we know, with several of the leadership here who have those relationships. I'd like to thank staff for representing us so well. Thank you again, Chair, for the opportunity to share a little bit about what I learned and what I heard, and back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the update, Second Vice Chair. It's great to hear that. Okay, so now we will go to a couple of announcements. So the first one is that we'll be posting applications for members of the public to serve on the audit committee. That will be posted on April 1 next week. Francesca will send an email to the board once they're available, and please encourage anyone you know who might be interested to apply. Applications will be up for 30 days. Councilmember Hsu and our SANDAG CFO will serve on the screening committee for the application process, and the board will be asked to approve the third and final member of the screening committee at its next meeting on April 9th. And the screening committee will then be asked to bring its nominations for the audit committee public member to the May 14th board meeting for approval. So please help spread the word. We know this is a very important role to serve for the agency. And next, I want to take a moment to recognize a member of the SANDAG team who is retiring today after nearly 19 years of service. He actually even does have an item on the consent calendar, I noticed. So he's working on his very last day here at this board meeting. So Jose Nuncio began working at SANDAG in 2002 as a senior engineer, and he most recently served the agency as the Transnet Department Director. In that role, he provided expert insight into the financial management of Transnet dollars and the delivery of Transnet-funded projects and programs. He is revered as an expert in all things Transnet, very big shoes that will need to be filled, and he has taught many of us about the intricacies of local, state, and federal funding. Jose has led a team of highly knowledgeable professional staff, which will help to ensure a smooth transition after he retires. Many of us have had the opportunity to get to know Jose over the years, and though we are sad to see him go, we are happy for him as he begins this next chapter. We know Jose loves to travel and is looking forward to continuing to travel beyond Southeast Asia, the Americas, and Europe to be exploring new places. He has served the people of San Diego with his creativity, resilience, and commitment to ensuring taxpayer dollars are managed with integrity and transparency. I know the rest of the board will join me in thanking you for your years of service, Jose, and wishing you all the best in the future. And SANDAG staff plans to host a retirement gathering once it is safe to do so. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. Yes, I would actually, and thank you for the opportunity. So, I started my career, my public career, about 30 years ago, 1991, at Caltrans. And I stayed there for about 11 years, and then I came to SANDAG in 2002. And I would say that over all these years, some of my greatest accomplishments, and just pride in having contributed to amazing teams, include having completed the extension of the 52 in Santee, the 76 up in North County, the 905 near the border, improvements, that I-15 managed lanes in San Diego, I-5, the coaster, the sprinter, trolley renewal, the Midcoast project, which is almost completed, and the bike program. All of these have been super complex, and that's what's made them just so much fun to work in. I would like to just thank some of my mentors and former people that have really inspired me. Gary Gallegos is at the top of the list. Kim Kawada, my first boss at SANDAG was Craig Scott, and other folks along the way include Muggs, Alan Casa from Caltrans, Pedro Orso, Rene Wassman, and my current boss, Andre. As I leave you, I think about all the work that remains, and you will be in good hands. You have an amazing Transnet team. It's small but mighty, and I would just like to go through their names because you will continue to hear from them as they continue to support you. So you've got Susan and Dawn, who are just amazing leaders. Ariana, Michelle, Sue and Chelsea, Julie, Richard, Deandra, Ruby, Nicholas, and Christine. All of them will continue to support you in amazing ways. Just one favor that I do ask of the SANDAG board. Transnet is a precious tool, and it's something that should be taken care of, and it is a promise to make life in San Diego better. So my request is that you continue to hold us accountable to make sure that we deliver on those promises. So thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Jose, for those sincere words. It's interesting that you went through all the transitions of the coronavirus in the last year and then retired right as we're now about to come out on the other side. So we wish you all the best in your retirement. It's well-deserved, and I hope you continue to stay in close touch with the agency.
I will. Thanks so much.
All right, now we'll move on to our executive director's report. Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear, Vice Chair Mayor Gloria, Second Vice Chair Mayor Solis. Good morning to all of you. And Mayor Solis, thank you for representing us at CalCon last week. A couple of items that are of note. First, I have been deeply troubled by the recent violence against Asian Americans. The reports attack on Asian Americans throughout the nation in recent months, including the deadly shooting in Atlanta last week, are tragic. My heart goes out to everyone who has been impacted by these senseless acts. We must be respectful of each other and celebrate our diversity. I stand with and in support of our Asian American and Pacific Islander colleagues. Our Asian American and Pacific Islander colleagues have made countless contributions to the agency, and I greatly appreciate the work every member of the SANDAG team does for our region every day. As you know, recently you adopted an equity statement, a commitment to equity that we have to hold true. That's going to be followed with some action. To my Asian American employees, I know what you're going through. I spoke to you yesterday. Stay strong and heads up high. And again, on behalf of the staff and our board, I want to thank you for the amazing contribution to this agency. A couple of items on the projects for the agency. The Dilmar Bluff stabilization. Following the serious collapse at the Dilmar Bluff last month, our team has worked with NCTD to conduct emergency repair to the railway. During the last 2 weeks, the tracks were closed to stabilize the bluff and to work on other rail projects along the corridor. This closure gave crews an opportunity to work safely and prepare for extensive structural repairs. Last time we met, you approved the ratification to support emergency work on the bluff. This action supported the team as we pursue and accept state funding for the emergency repair. Additionally, I'm happy to share with you that during its meeting yesterday, the California Transportation Commission allocated $10.5 million for the emergency repair of the Del Mar Bluff. Here, I want to thank the commissioners, the executive director, Mitch Weiss, and all the people who helped make this happen, especially our Commissioner Kehoe. We continue to coordinate with NCTD and Del Mar, California State Park, the Commission, and the Sheriff's Department to ensure beachgoers are aware of the danger of this collapse poses. Rail traffic through area is limited to speeds of 15 miles per hour for passenger and 10 miles per hour for freight. Our team is working hard to stabilize the bluff to ensure the rail operation can continue along the Los Angeles corridor, which is, as we told you before, very critical to the region's economy. Emergency repair is anticipated to begin in April and goes through July. In the long term, it's absolutely necessary that we move the track inland of the bluff as soon as we can. As you know, we have a study going, and that study will make recommendation. And I hope this region will take this seriously because of the economic vitality of this corridor. A little bit on the bond program update. Our amazing finance team continues to amaze me and continue to save money for the region. This week, we successfully refinanced 2014 Series A bond at lower interest rates, saving about $22 million. To date, the team saved about $130 million for Transnet Major Corridor program. These savings are going to allow us to keep project moving, given the cash flow issue I spoke to you about. And so for Andrea and his team, job well done. Thank you. This afternoon, SANDAG will host a joint meeting of the Border Committee and Committee of Binational Regional Opportunities. If you are available, I encourage you to attend. SANDAG has been working with Caltrans to find creative ways to conduct community outreach to continue advancing the border master plan. This meeting today is going to highlight a lot of things, but one important one is the Otay Mesa to port of entry. The Regional Transportation Plan update. At the last board meeting, we took a deep dive into the assumptions, data, and strategies we are evaluating to develop and fund the transportation plan. We had a panel of experts. I hope you enjoyed hearing from them. We had a very fruitful discussion. We are excited to share with you the data our team has been pouring over the nearly 2 years. That data has been sent out to you. My team and I are ready to answer any question you have. I hope you enjoyed this format of panel speaking. We're gonna have a few more as we move forward. We are continuing to make presentations. Last week, Ray, Jim, and myself spoke to Lemon Grove City Council. I want to thank Mayor Vasquez for inviting us to speak there. Just let you know that we are available to come to your council or supervisor chamber to speak on the 5 big moves and to answer questions. On the Mid-Coast, the largest infrastructure project in San Diego, it's almost 90% complete. The crews now are working on final touches. You're going to see in a few months these beautiful red cars having a trial run for an opening later this year. I want to thank the team that's working on the Mid-Coast, kept it on budget, on schedule, and you know, for a major infrastructure project like that to be on budget, on schedule is truly amazing. This week, we were speakers at the ULI, Urban Land Institute, and at the USD Real Estate Conference. Mayor Gloria opened the Real Estate Conference yesterday. I want to commend him at his comments and his starting the conference by talking about our region and acting like a big region. At the conference, we presented, there were 3 projects presented: the Riverwalk, the Chula Vista Bayfront, and our own Central Mobility Hub that we're partnering with the U.S. Navy. And to that, I want to welcome Mr. Dennis Keck for joining the board today. This project, the Central Mobility Hub, is a project that I think complicated, yes, take a while, expensive, but it's going to transform our region in ways that we couldn't even imagine. If done, this will be the largest undertaking west of Mississippi when it comes to transportation and economic development. At the ULI, both Victoria and Ryan did the presentation. Ryan did it at the ULI, Victoria did it at the Real Estate Conference. And I can tell you, you will be, as I was, proud of these staff making such an amazing presentation, to the point where the calls continue to come in about the amazing thing they did. You spoke about Jose, and I want to tell you that what a man, what a professional. He's going to be missed, but he's not going to go very far. He has been a tremendous leader for the team. I will miss him. And Jose, we wish you the best. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. So I think now we have in front of us the consent calendar. We did have one public comment on item 10, if that person is ready to speak now from the Climate Action Campaign.
Thank you, Chair. Madison, if you're still on the line and would like to speak, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good morning once again. I'm Madison with Climate Action Campaign, here to comment on item 10 of today's consent agenda, the proposed fiscal year 2021 program budget amendment for Del Mar Bluff stabilization. First, we thank SANDAG for working with the state to secure the needed $10.5 million to fully fund the emergency stabilization work at the site of the major bluff collapse in Del Mar in late February. The most recent bluff failure was only feet away from the train tracks, and with the impacts of the climate crisis only worsening, including sea level rise and erosion, flooding, and extreme weather events, we should expect more bluff failures in the near future with potentially fatal consequences. LoSAN is the backbone of the region's rail network as the second busiest intercity rail corridor in the nation, carrying 7.6 million passengers and $1 billion in goods annually. LoSAN is essential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, and dangerous air pollution from freight trucks. We urge this board to collaborate with regional stakeholders to immediately realign the tracks of the bluffs. It's clear that lives are seriously at risk here, so we must secure a safe and climate-ready future for LoSAN as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madison. Chair, that concludes the public comments.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a number of board members with their hands up. Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. I just wanted to comment briefly on item 10, also on consent. First, wanted to thank Executive Director Karada and his staff for the prompt response to the February 28th bluff collapse. And thank my colleagues as well for their support of these emergency measures. Obviously, my constituents are directly impacted by instability of the bluffs, but frankly, a threat to the LoSAN corridor is a threat to all San Diegans. The corridor is the freight and passenger lifeline for the entire San Diego region, and an extended closure would be a regional catastrophe. I also just would like to comment that the collapse highlights the inadequacy of approaching the bluffs issue
on an ad hoc or emergency basis. And we absolutely need to accelerate comprehensive remedies to the problem. So I am encouraged by the executive director's public statements along these lines, and I hope we can continue in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. First, I want to recognize Director Hassan for speaking out with regards to violence against Asian Americans throughout our country. Oops. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? First, I want to recognize Director Ricardo for recognizing the violence against Asian Americans throughout our country. We're not in a bubble, either in San Diego or in the work that we do. So I really want to thank him for his comments. I wanted to make some comments actually on a description on item 5 with regards to the Losan corridor in 2 respects. One, as part of the attachment of item 5, and this also reflects on item 10, in its description of the Losan corridor, I hope in the future we can also include the benefits, particularly in terms of health effects of the Losan corridor. So it's not just vehicle miles traveled that's reduced and less truck traffic, but it's also less asthma cases and cancer cases throughout that Losan corridor. I also want to, at least whenever appropriate, bring up that the Losan corridor should not stop in San Diego. The Losan corridor needs to continue past San Diego to Tijuana and be an international rail line. That's how important it can be and should be, and include the population in our region going south of San Diego. And it will reduce all of our problems, or many of our problems, at the border crossing as well. So I hope in the future, as we describe the Losan corridor, we speak of it as an international corridor, and that it holds many promises. If we start speaking of the Losan corridor in that way, I think we could start planning for that and budgeting for that. Losan corridor means a lot to all of us in San Diego, and I'm really happy that SANDAG has really made it a priority now, and to fix these immediate problems, as well as making the corridor much more effective by whatever means, the tunnels that we're looking into, and double tracking the entire route. Lastly, another item to add to the Losan corridor project list is electrification of the rail system. That's what we really need to do. The Bay Area is doing that for their rail lines. We should be doing that for our rail lines in Southern California as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Gasterlin.
Okay, thank you very much. I too have a comment on item 10, the $10.5 million grant. Actually, what I have is questions, and I was told that rather than pulling the item from consent, I could simply ask the questions here and get short, brief answers. So first, I want to thank the SANDAG team for getting the money together for the repair that's needed, and for doing the very fast response and keeping people safe for the past few weeks, both by making sure that people understand what the bluff fall means and fixing it, to the extent possible. So my question is, what is the timeline going to be for fixing this? My understanding is that there's a seawall that will be repaired. It's a 100-year-old wall that was down below, that 18 pilings will go in an area that was never designated previously as in danger of falling. And I'd like to add to the question of the timeline, will there be hydro studies of the bluff to the east and the water percolating through that bluff? The equivalent of 100 inches of rain go through that bluff from creeks, from irrigation. We really don't know where the water comes from, and we do know where it's going. It's going through the bluff and down to the ocean. That particular area has an enormous amount of new water. If you walk the ditch immediately starting at where the bluff fall happens and going south, it's about full of a foot of water constantly flowing. And that water is seeping up and over into the ditch and down under the ditch and through that bluff exactly where the fall happened. So I'd like to hear about hydro and water studies as well as geotechnical studies, and will those reports be made public?
So, let me, Mayor Castron, just on the, as I indicated, we're gonna start the temporary work on April and we're gonna finish hopefully by July. That's the plan, and that would include the piles and whatever retaining wall we need to put there. As to the hydraulic, then I'll ask Jim or John Haggerty to come in here. We don't have a plan to look at that, but I'm sure that's something we can discuss with the team. But Jim and John, do you know if anybody is looking at the issues of hydraulics seeping into the bluff?
Hassan, I'd be ready to respond. First, on the first question, the area of the bluff failure was a part of our Delmar 5 and 6 project. So we were actually going to, and now we'll accelerate the work to put in piles in the seawall in that area. But we will also do more seawalls and piles along a longer length of the bluff to protect it. So just to clarify that point. And then in terms of the geology and the hydrology of the area, we are studying all of that. That certainly is not something that we wouldn't be willing to share. And basically the way the bluffs work in that area is there's a sandstone layer and then there's a siltstone clay layer below it. And so kind of the water percolates through and hits that layer and then heads west towards the ocean. And so we collect some of that water in under drains, and some of it is actually above the level of the track, and that's what comes out and gets collected in that ditch. So we are looking at that. That is a factor in what we look at as we determine what we need to do to stabilize the bluffs. But we'd be happy to go over that information with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so we do need to get to the rest of this agenda today. So I would like to suggest that we continue this conversation if we need to at the end of the meeting. I know we have 3 more hands that just went up. If these are questions that need more detailed answers, then we really need to push that to the end. But if you want to make, all 3 of you who have your hands up want to make brief comments, I'll call on you now. But we really do need to get moving here. So Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you. My comment is actually in reference to Executive Director Hassan's comment on Councilmember Shu and the CFO reviewing applications for the audit committee. Shouldn't the independent auditor be a part of that process versus a board member and the independent auditor? And if you can elaborate on that.
I mean, I don't think the independent auditor chooses her own board members. So the SANDAG board chooses the board members according to our process. So I can let the attorney briefly answer that question in more detail if you'd like.
Just quickly, Board Policy 39 sets out the process for the selection, and it specifically calls out SANDAG CFO or a CFO of a member organization and a board member as chosen by the board chair. And then those 2 select a 3rd member subject to certain criteria that are set out in Board Policy 39. So this is just following the process of the board's own policy.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. I promise will be very brief. And this is a question that being answered later by staff. I just wanted to comment on or ask a question for later on item 7, which I think is clearly good news regarding the disparity study. But the Hispanic American owned disparities are alarming, not only because the disparity index is 38, but because it declined from 85 in 2014, and because the disparity is higher on the federal contracts with the DBE goals. So I just want to bookmark and ask staff, we can chat later to better understand what's happening here and why these numbers are what they are. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for raising that, and we will get back to that as an important question. Okay, so I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second, Sotelo Solis.
Thank you very much. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Councilmember Donovan.
Donovan, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland.
Gasterland, yes.
Thank you. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember Spriggs.
Spriggs, aye.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Shu.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Oceanside, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Councilmember Musgrove.
Musgrove, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto. Mayor Minto, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your vote.
Minto, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Hebner.
Hebner, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much. And that does pass unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we're on to item 14, which is the draft fiscal year 2022 program budget and strategic planning framework. Since this item was heard at the executive committee, the vice chair, Mayor Gloria, will introduce it. So go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to present this item. And I also want to thank SANDAG staff, acknowledging the incredible amount of work that goes into developing a $1.13 billion budget. This is no small feat, and something like this takes a great deal of effort. I appreciate SANDAG staff and hope that my colleagues on the board have had an adequate amount of time to review the materials and prepare for today's conversation. I'm happy to see that the board direction over the last few months has been incorporated into the development of this draft budget. I want to inform my colleagues that the executive committee reviewed this item at its last meeting, as our chair mentioned, and we had a vote to recommend approval by this board. I also want to draw the board's and the public's attention to the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee also provided their support, a unanimous vote in support of the staff's recommendations to this body. This agency is headed into a bold direction that the region has needed for a very long time. This budget helps to accomplish that by investing in data, equity, transportation infrastructure, and I think from my standpoint, most importantly, in the people who are crucial to making this work happen and keeping this momentum going. I'll hand it over to Hassan and his team now to tell you more. Again, Chair, thanks for the opportunity to present this item. Hassan, take it away. Or perhaps to Andre, if he wants to start the presentation.
I'm sorry, I was muted here. I should get it right, Mayor, after a year.
We all struggle with it, Hassan, no worries. Floor is yours.
Sorry, so good morning. Thank you, Mayor Gloria. Good morning, board members. I started here a bit over 2 years ago. And since that time, I have always told you the truth, been honest with you about our funding situation. And oftentimes, the truth sometimes hurts, but it is the truth. I am not one that paints a rosy picture, as by now you should know. I know things are tough for all of us. But what I'm telling you today is SANDAG must keep moving forward. And this is what we need to make that happen. You're going to hear about today. When the board hired me to come here, and the board meant business, so did I. This was an organization in trouble. Years of underinvestment, has resulted in a lot of things that needed to be done that weren't done. That underinvestment was showing. You saw the effects on our reputation, in our work. I remember my first SANDAG press conference when I said we're going to build a world-class organization. And at the time I indicated we need to figure out a way to pay for it. Then I went to work. Within my first 90 days, we started a comprehensive organizational assessment. This was a 360-degree look at the agency's effectiveness inside and out. Based on this work, we started to develop a strategic plan. Since then, our performance auditor, Mary Kay, has conducted review and risk assessment, a much needed look at the agency. Our program has been audited in June. You will hear about the most recent Transnet audit very shortly. These are good things. But as in many audits result in controls and action that need to be taken. You, our board, and our constituents expect us to move SANDAG forward and improve SANDAG on behalf of the 3.4 million San Diegans. We cannot ignore the impact of COVID-19 and the calls for racial justice and the inevitable mark this have left on our region. Work needs to be done there. What I have come to realize is this: our agency has been running too lean in too many areas for too many years. SANDAG has invested in resources needed to strengthen our program and practices. It is imperative that we make important changes to become a world-class organization. I'm speaking to you today as your executive director. I'm not trying to lobby you or sell you on something. I am just telling you as honestly as humanly possible that the budget you're gonna hear from the staff today is gonna move us towards building a world-class organization. And I think, if you think about it like I do, a small investment in putting resources in the right places could mean hundreds of millions of dollars for this region. And this agency is in its way moving forward. Now, I talk about the past 2.5 years. Let me turn it to the team to talk about the future. So with that, Ray Traynor.
Thanks, Hassan. Appreciate that. Chair Blakespear, members of the board, thank you for your time this morning. As Hassan said, we've been on a journey in terms of defining sort of a new SANDAG. And today I'd just like to guide you through some of the highlights of this journey. It really began about 2.5 years ago, and this journey is really oriented towards transforming every aspect of our organization. So there's really kind of 3 themes that we wanted to spend some time with you this morning. And we're going to talk first about the strategic planning framework that Hassan mentioned. And that's really critical because what it does is it really aligns our mission, our vision. This is the why SANDAG exists, with the initiatives and the strategies and all the priority projects. That's really the what we do. And it really helps to guide and makes us accountable for progress in this transformation. The second thing we're going to talk about this morning about the resources that are going to be needed to bring this strategic plan to life. We're also going to talk about the benefits that these investments have for not only SANDAG as an organization, but for the region as a whole. And then you're going to hear a bit about the recommendation that we've got before you to amend the Transnet ordinance. And then third, you're going to hear from our CFO, Andre Dujon, and several of our directors, and they're going to walk you through the main elements of the draft fiscal year 22 budget, along with the commitments that we're proposing to undertake in the year ahead in service to the region. But before we step into that, I'd just like to recap just a few of the highlights of the journey that we've talked about, that we've been on for the last couple of years. And this journey is really about helping us to become a more effective organization. So many of you can remember when you as the board hired Hassan to bring change to SANDAG into our region. And that journey of transformation has been underway since his arrival. Some of the notable things that have been accomplished just in the recent times where we got a bill passed to help us provide sufficient time to develop a visionary regional plan. We also developed a bill and got SEEK with streamlining legislation passed for the Central Mobility Hub, which is very significant. You heard about the Del Mar Bluffs, and we were able to make this not only a statewide priority, but a national priority, focusing on safety and our economy. And as we've talked about in the past, we've identified over $100 million for the stabilization work. And at the same time, we're really committed working with the region to move those tracks inland. We've talked a lot about data, and we've made significant advancements when it comes to data science and analytics. Yes? I'm sorry. So we've made significant advancements both in data science and the application in terms of analytics to help really drive data-driven conversations and data-driven policy development. Later this morning, your chief economist and chief analytics officer, Ray Major, is going to step you through some of the proposals in the fiscal year 22 budget that are really focusing on helping us advance in this area. On the finance and treasury front, in the first quarter, our finance team closed 3 bond issuances and refinanced our TIFIA loan for the Midcoast. In fact, we've had 6 different bond issuances in the last 15 months alone, and that resulted in over $1.6 billion in proceeds for projects and about $180 million in debt service savings. So these are significant contributions that have just occurred since we've started this work. You know, recently we also brought to you and you adopted our commitment to equity statement. And our hope and our vision behind that is that it's going to demonstrate accountability, and it also acknowledges our responsibility to make changes that create a brighter future for everybody in our region. And so as I talk about these recent accomplishments, I do so to help illustrate the fact that this is not the same SANDAG. I think what you're finding is that we're far more honest. We're open, and with Hassan's leadership, we tell it like it is. We're also willing to have very difficult conversations. We've been committed, hearing feedback from you for more engagement with you as board members. Many of you recognize the more frequent conversations we're having with you, our offers to conduct briefings with you personally. This is all designed to help bring more informed decision-making. We're also on a quest to become more agile and more responsive. Just recently, we provided extensive data analysis and reporting, not just through the pandemic, as we really tried to reveal some of the impacts on our low-income and minority neighborhoods that nobody else was really talking about at that time. But just at your meeting 2 weeks ago, in response to questions that members of the board asked, we presented a whole conversation around our work involved in data-driven planning. So in summary, we're just getting started with this transformation, and there's a lot more to do. I think many of you are aware that SANDAG regularly undergoes many types of audits, reviews, and assessments, and most of these identify improvements. And the issue that we've been facing time and again is that we don't have all of the resources necessary to incorporate all of the recommendations into our programs. And from a management perspective, we can't ignore this any longer. We've really got to ensure that the agency has the resources that it needs, and we need to make investments. And we believe in doing so, it's going to help make us as an organization significantly stronger and more reliable for you. Now, part of this investment is really rethinking what qualifies as administrative expenses as part of the Transnet measure that was passed a little more than 30 years ago. In fact, the Transnet performance auditors recently presented to the ITALC, and one of the things that they noticed was that the world has changed since the ordinance was first passed. And you're going to hear from Andre later this morning about what administration expenses are, how they've evolved and expanded to really address the times that we're facing now. And our planning and our budgeting work also needs to evolve and change as well. At a special meeting last week with the Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee, they discussed at length this need for improvements and for change with us as an organization. And they were also very much interested in understanding what would be going on with the investments that we're recommending. And at the end of that very good conversation, the Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee unanimously recommended that the board approve increasing the Transnet administrative apportionment from 1 to 2%. So what this brings us to is really a critical point. And I think you heard this in Mayor Gloria's comments and from Hassan's comments, that we've got to sustain the forward progress. If we don't, we have the risk of really losing ground. And so in order for us to stay the course for this transformation of the organization into the world-class organization that you as the board and many others in the region have asked Hassan to lead us into, this is what it's all about. And not doing so really poses a risk for us to revert back to the old SANDAG. And nobody is really interested in that. So taking a step back, I just wanted to kind of summarize for you, since Hassan arrived about 2 years ago, we embarked on this comprehensive organizational assessment. Hassan referenced that. It was really a 360 view where we took a really deep look at our organization and our practices. Many of you as board members were involved in that process. A number of you as stakeholders in the community and in the region were also involved. And we also engaged our employees along the way. And this work really examined to our whole structure. It looked at our culture. It looked at our business processes. And out of that grew a set of recommendations that were really used to help inform this strategic plan that we're going to be talking about this morning. And really what we're trying to do with the strategic plan now is to marry the learnings from this assessment, all the feedback that we received from you in the region, and better align our organization that comes from our teams first, the people, organizing our technologies, modernizing them, and all the resources that we have. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we met with the executive committee to discuss the importance of this transformation that's been underway. We talked about the journey that we've been on the last couple of years, and we talked with them about the core elements of the strategic planning framework, which I'm going to introduce to you now. During that conversation, we heard good feedback about our mission and our vision statement. In fact, we're asking all of you at the board today to consider and approve that as a part of today's agenda item. So stepping into the strategic planning framework, if you can see the icon that shows this infinity diagram, this was developed with one major theme right at the center, and that's the why. And this is top of mind for all of us. This is why SANDAG's work is so critical to the region. Now, the strategic planning framework and this infinity diagram tries to incorporate the expectations for how we carry out our work, and it lays out a roadmap and also describes the what. So we've got the why, the how, and the what. And we're going to focus on the what later this morning, talking about what's in the fiscal year 22 budget, some of the key highlights of our programs, the projects, and the services that we deliver here in the region. But this also talks about how we are adapting to meet the growing needs of you, the board, and the public we serve. So our organizational alignment that I'm talking about begins with our why, and that starts with our vision and our mission. And this infinity loop really demonstrates how every element of our organization, the how, the why, and the what, are connected to and informed by the mission and the vision. So with these two statements that I'm going to review for you right now, we received a lot of input. Many of you as board members were interviewed by our consultants some time back where you had an opportunity to provide feedback. Since the pandemic, we spent quite a bit of time internally receiving and reviewing that feedback and developing the mission and vision statements that you have before you. Each of these were carefully considered in terms of the words, what they represent, and what they mean. And so beginning with our vision statement, I'd like to read that for you. It's very succinct. And at its core, what we talk about, SANDAG's vision, is to pursuing a brighter future for all. Now on the next slide, we're going to talk about the mission statement. And the mission statement that you see here is, we are the regional agency that connects people, places, and innovative ideas by implementing solutions with our unique and diverse communities. So to emphasize the importance of this vision and mission statement to us as an organization and to us as a region, at the end of today's meeting, we're going to be asking for your approval of these mission and vision statements, which were recommended by the executive committee to the board for approval. So to kind of dig in a little bit more about the strategic planning framework and why it's so important to today's conversation about the budget, I just wanted to try to illustrate a few elements of this that I think will help now start to bring our conversation later this morning about the projects and the programs to life. So when we look at how SANDAG is organized around the why, we want to talk a little bit now about the what. And one of the key things that we've identified as a part of the strategic planning work that we're undertaking is we've identified a number of initiatives that we're going to be pursuing with vigor through the fiscal year 22 budget and beyond. And this is really transformational efforts that help us as an organization to change. These initiatives are complex and they're large and they're really transformational at their heart. And I want to just step you through these 5 items. First, our first initiative is advancing equity and inclusion. Second, enhancing organizational culture. Third, we've got to improve our digital capabilities. Fourth, become a data-driven organization. And fifth, pursue funding sources. Now, another aspect of what we do at SANDAG are our strategies. And when we talk about strategies, it's really thinking through how we align our resources, our staff, in delivering these core initiatives and living out our mission. Now, organizational alignment that we're working on is really not a destination, it's a continuous process. This infinity loop helps to define some of the continuation that's going on. And this is really necessary because the external and internal conditions that we're working in are inevitably going to change. And so we've got to be able to have a strategic planning framework that enables us to be agile, to be flexible, and to be responsive. And at the same time, maintain alignment with our core focus. And so when we talk about what SANDAG does at its core, it's really premised on these strategies. These really represent all the agency activities and responsibilities, both internal and external. So the first strategy is to use data and analytics to support innovation and to inform decision-making. Our second strategy is to plan for a vibrant future. Third, it's to bring plans and projects to life. The other thing is to operate programs into services. Another one of our core strategies is to engage with the communities we serve. And finally, to provide outstanding business advisory services. So you're going to hear in just a few minutes a little bit more about some of the components of the draft budget and how they were developed around these strategies. And our directors are going to step you through that in just a few minutes. But one of the last things I wanted to point out to you about the strategic planning framework, and you've heard a lot about it over the last months, is our focus on priority projects. And in fiscal year 22, we've identified 5 priority projects. And of course, at the top of that list is the development of the 2021 regional plan, which is scheduled for adoption by you in late 21. The Mid-Coast Trolley, the region's largest infrastructure project ever undertaken, is going to open to the public later this year. The Del Mar Bluffs and that stabilization effort. And next fiscal year, we're going to start work on our 5th and largest bluff stabilization project. The 4th priority project is the Central Mobility Hub. And our 5th priority project is the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry and the completion of State Route 11. It's really because of the strategic regional significance that these priorities are considered. And these are fundamental outputs of that infinity diagram, all the work that we do, premised on the why, looking at the what, and talking about how we do it. Over the course of the next few months, we're going to be bringing these priority projects back to the board. We've started that at the end of last calendar year, and we're going to continue that through the spring and into the early summer to be able to get you further acquainted and more aware of all the different activities involved in each of these 5 priorities. So back to the strategic plan and why it's so critical. Again, this is about a roadmap for change. This not only positions us as an agency to address the current issues that we face as a region, but it puts us on a path to help us adapt and to grow to meet the changing needs of you as our board and of the public that we serve. And this also sets us on a course for the future. We really know where we want and need to be as a public agency. We also know that we don't have all that we need to be able to deliver what's being asked of us. And so to implement the strategic plan and to be able to be responsive to all the forces that are calling us to pursue this change and to pursue it with vigor, we're going to need to have properly allocated resources. And so I'd like to ask Andre Dujon, your CFO, to share just a little bit more about how the strategic planning framework that I've talked about has helped to inform and guide our fiscal year 22 budget. Andre?
Thank you, Ray, and good morning all. So the proposed budget totaling $1.13 billion uses a variety of funding sources and is prepared in accordance with the FTA and FHWA guidelines, which require submission of a draft to the funding agencies each March. Now, SANDAG bylaws require that a draft budget to be considered by April 1st of each year and the final budget to be approved by June 30th. There are three primary components of the program budget where SANDAG directly manages projects. First, the overall work program, or OWP, which is in chapters 2 and 3 and provides an inventory of SANDAG's regional planning and data projects and programs with a total budget of $53 million. Second, the regional operations and services section is in chapter 4 and includes all operation-related programs and services, such as the SR 125 toll road, freeway service patrol, and the ARGIS programs and services. The total operations budget is $60.3 million. And the third major component is the capital program in chapter 9, which includes the projects approved as part of the transit extension that are currently underway and other regionally significant capital investments. Projected capital expenditures for 2022 are $686.7 million out of the total capital program of $8.56 billion. You will hear further details from our directors on each of these programs later in this presentations. So as far as the funding environment, investments are needed to optimize the agency's technological data and modeling resources, support the personnel needed to carry out the agency's mission and priority projects, and fund the independent performance auditor activities. In order to provide the agency with a sustainable source of funding necessary to support ongoing and future activities, the fiscal year 22 budget includes a proposed adjustment to the transit ordinance and a one-time use of contingency funds. Now, looking at transit, the board is responsible for administrating the transit extension ordinance, which is a 0.5% sales tax, and includes certain categories for Transnet funds, including the administration allocation of 1%. For fiscal year 22, this 1% represents an estimated $3.2 million. Too many years of underinvestment have left SANDAG with a gap between expectations and the agency's ability to deliver on them. We propose to remedy this discrepancy to shrink this gap and prevent it from growing. Our admin fee has been 1% off the top, and we are proposing an increase to 2%. You've already heard a couple times that the ITAC unanimously approved or voted to recommend to the board an approval to amend the transit extension ordinance to increase the administrative allocation. Now, first, we must also define what is contained within the admin allocation by looking at what we did previously versus what we're doing today. Earlier, Jose mentioned that he started his career at Caltrans in 1991 and ultimately came to SANDAG. I started my career a little early at KPMG as an auditor in 1988 before coming to SANDAG. Back in 1988, SANDAG was one of my biggest clients, and the initial transit ordinance had just passed. I helped SANDAG set up the chart of accounts and the financial statements for Transnet. Back then, admin meant accounting, compliance, and reporting. Today, 33 years later, a desire for more and more detailed information on nearly everything. Admin includes advanced reporting, data analytics, big data, advanced modeling, transparency, complex financial transactions, involved responses to audits, modern systems, performance-based planning and programming. I'll now turn it back to Ray, who will describe what the board and the region receive from this investment.
Thanks, Andre. Well, I imagine a lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, what are we going to receive from this investment that staff are requesting? So I want to just take a moment to kind of step you through. Now, over the past years, we've received a number of audits. I mentioned earlier that we undergo audits, reviews, and assessments on an ongoing basis. One of the things that we're proposing to do is to be able to be more responsive to the number of audits that have asked for us to make changes. And so one of those examples was the Transnet 10-year comprehensive review, which was performed back in 2018. One of the things that the auditors pointed out was that the region needs to reconsider how region-wide allocations of Transnet and other sources can be used to help enhance performance monitoring, analysis, and reporting. The Transnet auditors also pointed out that region-wide allocations from Transnet and other sources that would be used for performance monitoring and tracking could be part of that local streets and roads and environmental mitigation program, and this would help to achieve compliance with state and federal reporting requirements. That 10-year audit also pointed out at the time that at that point, SANDAG didn't have any formal data governance nor formal quality assurance processes or monitoring processes. Now, over the years, there have been a number of Transnet performance audits, and the recurring theme is calling us to change. And many of these changes and recommendations that are being called for are going to require investments if we're really going to deliver on the results that the recommendation process promises. We've been told through these audits that SANDAG's been challenged to demonstrate its accomplishments or even to measure the outcomes for all the Transnet programs. We've heard recommendations that performance targets need to be set and that this is a best practice for government. We've heard about the need for more focus on being compliant and transparent, and that's going to improve our accountability. We've also heard recommendations that we've got to improve documentation and the transparency around our quality assurance program when it comes to data and analytics. So for us to be able to be responsive to all these things, we've tightened our belts as much as we can, but additional resources are now needed if we're really going to accomplish the work that's behind these recommendations. We had a briefing with the board leadership a few weeks ago. And one of the questions that the board leaders asked us was, what does management propose to do with all these additional resources? So there's 5 themes, and I maybe point you to attachment 5, which is page 517 in this morning's agenda. And Andre and myself are going to step you through these 5 things. So first, what you can expect from us is around data, around performance monitoring, analysis, and reporting. And we're proposing to conduct significant improvements in order to enhance our performance in each of these areas. And you've heard just a couple weeks ago about data is becoming the new oil. In fact, we're dealing with mounds of data, and increasing the amounts of data are becoming available to us each year that are available for us to both analyze and to monitor and to help us improve the Transnet program. Now, the data that we're able to get can be incredibly insightful, and it can allow us to better optimize the billions of dollars that we invest in the region and in our transportation system. However, this is not coming without a cost. Making use of this data requires advanced skills in data science, advanced skills in quality assurance to really help us make sure that when we acquire the data, we process it correctly, that we have unbiased analysis in our interpretation. And so therefore, the work on quality assurance, quality control, and data governance is key to be able to ensure that accurate representations are made and that transparency is throughout the entire process. And this is really to help us reduce the potential for any mistakes. Now, to be able to put big data and analytics to use and make practical improvements, we've got to be able to set performance targets to be able to measure our performance against. And this applies not only to the Transnet program, but to every program and project that SANDAG undertakes. Now, doing target setting is not easy. It requires a lot of work. And also, we've got to now put in the tools and the process in place to be able to monitor and then provide unbiased reporting back to you and to the public who's holding us accountable. Now, the transformation work that we're talking about around data, around analytics is not easy. It requires a lot of work to set up, requires new tools and processes, along with training and development of our staff. But this is going to help propel us beyond what Andre was talking about has historically occurred, and that is mere compliance reporting. And it's going to help drive more openness and more transparency as we seek to make this data more accessible through an open data portal, and to be able to use data in ways that we just have not thought of before to help ensure that we're making the progress that we're committed to and to make our programs more accessible and understandable. So the second thing that you can expect from us revolves around the commitment to equity statement that you made. Now, with the recent adoption of that commitment to equity statement, we're intending to bring a social equity lens to all the policies, all the programs, all of our projects, all of our services, including the Transnet program of projects. Now, there's an increased demand for resources and expertise needed to be able to manage and to support our efforts around Title VI, around environmental justice, around the Americans with Disabilities Act, and our external Equal Employment Opportunity Program to be able to bring greater analysis and understanding to you as policymakers, as well as to our project managers who are responsible to steward these projects through completion. I'd now like to pass it off to Andre, who's going to talk about the remaining 3 items that we're proposing.
Thanks, Ray. And so the third item is to support for funds management and to pursue new funding opportunities. So we provide support to the region and local jurisdiction with competent financial management of the transit program funds and to support continued innovative financing and refinancing activities, as Ray mentioned earlier. We currently don't have dedicated staff to support the financial management activities of the program. Now, yes, as CFO, it is my job to be creative. We did something that no agency had attempted in over 20 years and leveraged our $1 billion FFGA for the Midcoast from the federal government and sold $331 million on GANs, or grant anticipation notes, which actually won SANDAG the bond buy deal of the year. It is my job to convince the TIFI office to let us refinance our undrawn Midcoast loan and be the first in the country to achieve that and save over $123 million for the region. But that takes a lot of time, energy, and resources, not only on the front end, but even more on the back end, with all the financial reporting, compliance reviews, investor relations, EMA postings, that frankly, we don't have all the staff. I'm straining our finance department to the limit. In fact, 2 of my most seasoned transit accounting team members recently resigned. They couldn't keep up. Having Jose retired doesn't help either. I think also as funding gets scarcer, we need additional resources to go out and find outside funds to continue to leverage our program. The fourth is the support for the audits and the OIPA office. SANDAG pursued and was unsuccessful in receiving funding through a state unfunded mandate. And as such, agency funds are being allocated from existing core programs to support the ongoing work of the OIPA. And if Mary Kay is available, I'd ask her to maybe comment and say some of the most recent issues that she's dealing with in her office and the support that she needs.
Yes, good morning, board and Andre, everybody. I can share a little bit from an audit perspective. When I originally came to SANDAG almost 2 years ago now, of course, it was just me with no staff. And the first thing we need to do was set up office, which takes about a year. And then also hire necessary staff. Audits take resources. It can't be done by one person. An agency this size, I did an analysis and provided to the board, supported 15 audit positions. I went to the board last year and asked for 7, and I currently have 2. And this additional funding would help support another audit staff. But in addition to needing the resources to perform audits and reviews, which is completely new to SANDAG from an internal perspective, I have to say, in its entirety, SANDAG has never truly had an independent internal audit perspective, which frankly, external auditors are very narrow in scope. Their job is to look at a narrowed scope area for compliance or rules or regulations. And the work of an internal auditor is to really pull back the blankets and look at it from a holistic standpoint to ensure that there's good system controls around all processes. And in that turn supports that whatever's being done and whatever area is being looked at, there should be sufficient enough controls in place that would bring some assurance to those external auditors. Well, SANDAG has never had that really for its entirety. And so, as you can imagine, when you pull back those blankets, there are system updates that are going to be required. There's a new way of looking at things. There's implementing controls and processes, and that takes resources on the side of management. Our last audit showed that there were some, control weaknesses, and that there were a need for a great more deal of documentation. We're currently in the process of looking at contracts and procurement, and we are already finding, again, that there's areas around controls that need to be improved. And frankly, one of the larger reasons for these lack of controls is a lack of resources. You have to have proper segregation of duties, and what we're finding is there isn't, or there is a control, but it's not being implemented on a consistent basis. And it's because these employees are really being pushed to do just to get the work done. So, when you do that, you risk that control not being fully implemented or the control not working. And then it's being pushed aside, and that compiles to control issues and then findings and audits. And so we're, even as an office, looking at ways that we can step back from audits and say, how do we just kind of start to look at this from a very foundational basis and say, where can we look at processes and then controls around them to ensure that there's support and there's controls, and then from there build on audits? Because if we continue to audit, we're only going to continue finding the same issues. So we really need to work jointly and as a team with management on how can we look at the foundation and see where there's cracks and help improve and bring those cracks to a smaller space in between. And that takes resources. It takes resources both on OPA's side, but also on management. They can't be stretched so far that controls get bypassed because they're just trying to get the work done. And at this point, around the areas that were mentioned, QC, which is a huge area that if it's neglected for too long, under OMB requirements, not even about a best practice, it's actually a requirement under OMB that performance reviews are being included and being looked at and being measured, and end results are measurable, and that this is ongoing, a constant ongoing basis of a QC presence in all federal related grant reviews. These things cannot be continued to be neglected, because in the end it will come back to haunt us and not in a good way. So we want to, get ahead of the game, be proactive, catch ourselves up, and in doing that, really be able to stand proud in that, the transparency and everything we say we should be doing, that we're actually doing, and have confidence in that. And that really does take resources and a commitment from the board to say, okay, it's going to cost us a little more, but the cost benefit, the savings that you'll obtain in the end is going to be much greater than the cost. So yes, there is some upfront cost, but the benefit is going to be far greater in the end. And so it really does take commitment from the governance level, that there is a need to change, and that change is supported. And that takes resources, and it takes resources on both sides, both the auditing and oversight side and management, to be able to follow through and actually perform those corrective action plans that they implement and that they put in place. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and that's the perspective from the auditor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So I'm just going to make the last point on the additional investment is for our member agency services and communications. Now, one of the most important roles that the Board of Directors plays is the Regional Transportation Commission, the body responsible for administering the transit program. But based on feedback from board members and the results of the strategic planning process, staff has implemented an enhanced member services component of the work that we do to make sure that our board members have all the information that they need to make an informed decision on behalf of the region. We now offer briefings to each of our board members in advance of every meeting. We continue to focus on better ways to share complex information through our reports and PowerPoints, and staff responding to countless inquiries in between meetings as well. We also organized a member orientation this year to help get our new members up to speed on the many major transit milestones that are coming this year. Through these efforts, we help to ensure the oversight and integrity of the transit program and build a better partnership with our board in support of the agency's initiatives, a primary one being the attraction of federal and state funding to augment the transit program. So I want to lay out a timeline for the board action to amend the transit ordinance. On attachment 6, we show the details of the flow of funds, and if this proposed change is approved by the board, the impact to the various other programs, which in my opinion is very minimal for the overall return to the transit program. As far as the timeline for the board action, section 16 states the commission may, with a 2/3 vote of the commission, amend the ordinance to further its purposes. Should the board wish to amend the ordinance, an amendment would be brought for board consideration, first and second readings in April and May of 2021. Thereafter, the amendment would take effect 30 days after its final passage, would be incorporated into the final fiscal year 22 SANDAG program budget. Just I want to touch on our contingency reserves. Looking at all the contingency funds, the SANDAG contingency reserves are summarized in Chapter 12 for all the major programs, including the OWP, the Regional Operations, Capital Budget, and Administrative Services. This year, we are proposing the use of $905,000 of the OWP contingency reserve to develop the Regional Workforce Development Program, cover COVID-19 expenses, and develop an equity action plan. After using this amount and assuming potential savings of $500,000, both fiscal year 21 and 22, the reserve will be at 11% of the 22 OWP budget, exceeding the minimum target of 10% as defined in Board Policy 30. Now, the fiscal year 22 budget has many work efforts designed to support how SANDAG does and what we do. I mentioned earlier, I'll ask a few department directors to share a little more about these budget components and how they connect the strategies that Ray mentioned earlier. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Andre, and good morning, board members. I'm Melissa Kaufelt, your Director of Organization Effectiveness, and I'll be covering two segments of the proposed FY22 budget this morning, the administration and board budget, as well as the personnel budget. The administration and board budgets described in Chapter 7 of the budget document include costs for agency operations, and in total represent approximately $21 million or 2% of the proposed budget. Costs for items like rent and insurance are projected to increase next year, while other overhead expenses like travel, meeting costs, office equipment, telephone services are expected to be lower. Staff will watch this budget carefully as we return to on-site work in the months ahead. And in keeping with the theme of investing in the agency, next year's administration and board budgets include resources that will improve how SANDAG achieves its goals through our people, processes, and technology, and all aligned to our strategic plan. I'll provide examples from three areas. The first of these relates to equity and inclusion. As you've heard, we'll be developing and implementing the initial phases of the agency's equity action plan. And we also intend to stand up a new workforce utilization program to engage underserved and underrepresented individuals throughout the region. The next area of focus is our core internal business functions. We recognize the need to adapt to the changing needs of the agency and to ensure appropriate oversight and administrative practices are in place. These needs were identified in the organization assessment that was conducted back in 2019. And as a result, our human resources, finance, contracts and procurement, communications, and information technology programs have all identified areas for ongoing improvements. And finally, the agency's technology modernization efforts will advance in the year ahead. Many of the functional business areas I've just mentioned will rely on digital solutions to drive efficiency and better outcomes. One of the hallmark projects we have coming up is the implementation of an enterprise resource planning system. Improvements in communication, collaboration, and engagement are other significant benefits expected from the investment in technology. As staff, we're keenly aware that a hybrid work environment and hybrid meetings will be critical to our success in the future. There are plans to upgrade the antiquated audiovisual system in the boardroom, and with that, create more meaningful opportunities for engaging the public, whether they visit our office or participate virtually. As you've heard Hassan and others say, SANDAG's goal is to become a world-class organization. This strategic planning framework creates a roadmap for achieving this goal, and a vital component to our success is the investment in the agency's internal operations, our people, our processes, our technology. And speaking of people, I'd like to shift focus to the personnel budget, and we'll touch on 3 areas there: staffing, compensation, and benefits. So starting with staffing. In this presentation, Ray, Andre, Mary, and others have noted that recent organization assessments, reviews, and audit findings continue to point to the need for SANDAG to improve and strengthen its programs and practices related to financial controls, auditing, performance monitoring, and equity. The work that needs to be done in these areas is complex. It's highly technical. There are new skill sets and expertise that we'll need to bring to the agency. And while we have an incredibly talented team of employees here at SANDAG, we simply don't have the capacity to take on this new work and also meet our existing obligations and responsibilities. To address this resource gap, the FY22 budget proposes to add 15 new staff positions. 12 of these are core or regular positions. 3 of them are contingent limited term roles. And details of these positions have been included in attachment 8 to your staff report. Moving on to the second area of the personnel budget, this one about compensation. Last year's salary and compensation audit conducted by SANDAG's independent auditor, Mary Kay, brought attention to our program and practices in these areas. Guided by a comprehensive corrective action plan that the audit committee and board approved last November, management has started implementing improvements and is doing so in collaboration with Mary Kay and her team. For example, the administrative policy related to performance management and the distribution of pay to employees has been significantly updated. This was approved and implemented when the revised employee handbook was issued in January. And as part of this work, Mary Kay provided feedback on the policy changes prior to implementation. A copy of the policy has been included as attachment 8A to the budget report. And from management's perspective, our intention is to continue working with Mary Kay as we introduce other changes to strengthen our compensation and staffing programs. Regarding the proposed FY22 budget, there are 2 compensation-related requests. The first relates to the agency's salary structure. Staff initiated a salary range study in late 2020. This was one of the commitments we made as part of the audit corrective action plan. This work is being conducted by the agency's compensation consultants and is due to be completed in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Recommendations from the study will be presented to the executive committee and to the board with the final budget in May. These may include an overall increase to our salary ranges to reflect market conditions, or perhaps reallocation of positions to higher level salary ranges. Again, all based on market data. The second request is for a pool of funds to provide pay increases to employees. SANDAG uses a pay for performance compensation model where employees progress through their salary ranges via merit-based increases. This design rewards employees based on their contributions to the agency. It also supports the highest levels of organization performance. The requested pool of funds has been broken into 2 categories, each with a specific purpose. There's a 3% pool that would be used to provide performance rewards, merit increases and/or bonuses to employees. This 3% recommendation is based on market research conducted by our compensation consultants and represents the average salary budget increases organizations across a variety of industries, including public administration, are anticipated to implement in the year ahead. And a 1% pool also is proposed. This is in anticipation of recommendations stemming from the salary range study. The funds would be used exclusively to provide pay equity or position reclassification adjustments to employees. The combined cost of these two compensation adjustment pools is almost $1.9 million. This includes increases to the proposed salary budget, as well as increases to salary-based benefits such as pension plan contributions, workers' compensation insurance, and Medicare taxes. Details about the two compensation adjustment pools have been included in Attachment A to your staff report. Management acknowledges that concerns have been raised about the overall fairness of SANDAG's compensation practices, and management is confident the revised performance management policy, along with improved processes and controls, will ensure an equitable distribution of merit increases or bonuses to all eligible employees. And further to this, as part of the corrective action plan, Mary Kay and her team will review and test the changes that management introduces to determine if these are effective in meeting our program objectives. And let me wrap up here by touching on the third and final component of the personnel budget, which is benefits. No significant changes are proposed for next year, and market-based costs to retirement, health benefits, workers' compensation, are reflected in the personnel cost summary. This is included in Chapter 11 of your budget document. And at this point, I'd like to call on Andre to discuss the status of the agency's Section 115 trusts. Andre.
Thanks, Melissa. So as part of the benefits budget, staff has proposed continuation of contributions to two IRC Section 115 tax-exempt trusts established as a means for saving for future pension costs and future retiree health insurance obligations. Now, taking a closer look at our Section 115 pension pre-funding trust, in fiscal year 2017, the board approved the establishment of the trust with the goal of paying down the unfunded accrued liability in an accelerated manner. In fiscal year 2017, the actuarial analysis showed that the initial contribution of $3.5 million and an additional $1 million contribution over the next 15 years would enable SANDAG to pay down the current accrued liability in 15 years versus the 30 years as projected by CalPERS, saving the agency approximately $29 million in pension costs. I'm pleased to announce that based on our most recent analysis, it appears that we are on track to be fully funded by 2031, as shown by this chart. The bars in light blue or light pink, or dark pink, sorry, are the PERS assets. And when you combine them with the light pink bars, those are the 115 trust assets. And you can see where the bars intersect the blue line in 2031 is when we're actually fully funded. As of today, or as of December 30th, 2020, combining the assets, we are at 77% funded ratio, which is one of the highest levels that SANDAG has had in many years. So our recommendation is that we continue to contribute the $1 million towards this trust. SANDAG also participates in the CERP, which is the California Employees Retiree Benefit Trust, administered by CalPERS to fund the OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits. And SANDAG joined CERP in 2009 and has made the full actuarial recommended contributions each year. And we are recommending that we continue to make the contribution this year, which is $600,000. Now, Melissa shared a bit about how the administration and board budgets will help SANDAG achieve its goals. Next, our Director of Engineering and Construction, John Haggerty, will highlight what is proposed for delivery through our capital budget. John?
Good morning. So the SANDAG capital budget, it's the largest portion of the program. This is, as we've heard, $687 million of work effort with 133 projects. These 133 projects are really at all stages of development. The program includes projects in environmental and conceptual phases, design, procurement, construction, and closeout. Today, I'm going to provide a brief glimpse of the capital program in the next slide. So in FY22, a number of projects will open to the public. Largest amongst them is the Midcoast project, which is, again, the single largest trolley extension ever. The Midcoast is now in its 5th and final year of construction. Midcoast, with 9 new stations, will provide service in the congested I-5 corridor and connect the border and downtown to the University City area. The project currently remains on schedule and within budget for opening late this calendar year. Construction on the El Portal undercrossing began late last year and is anticipated to be complete in the spring of 2022. The project will create a new undercrossing below the low sand track in Leucadia, adding safe and convenient access under the tracks, and is an important element in Encinitas' coast highway improvements. So the project is funded by the city of Encinitas and is being built by SANDAG through a partnership with the city. This year, on the I-5 North Coast corridor, Caltrans and SANDAG will achieve 2 major construction milestones. Managed lanes will be open from Manchester in Encinitas to Palomar Airport Road and Carlsbad in spring 2022, extending lanes for carpools from the I-5-805 merge to Carlsbad. Caltrans is also completing the new highway bridge over the San Leo Lagoon. This is a vital element in the HOV and for the HOV lanes in the corridor, but also improves bike and pedestrian access via a suspended bridge across the San Leo Lagoon. And this bridge was a key element in the San Leo Lagoon environmental restoration program. In addition, bike projects will open on Georgia Meade Landis Street and Uptown 4th and 5th in the city of San Diego. Staff will continue to progress projects in the development phase. The low sand tracks are benched into 1.6 miles of coastal bluff through Del Mar. NCTD and SANDAG are continuing a program of bluff stabilization to preserve rail operations that carry passengers and freight in this congested I-5 corridor. While alternatives are being studied for the eventual relocation of the line off the bluffs. We know the bluffs will continue to retreat by the action of the weather and waves, and we have experienced the 2 recent bluff failures that have been discussed. That required emergency action to resolve. These events point to the immediate need to stabilize the bluffs until the tracks can be relocated. Construction will start early next fiscal year on the phases for the complete stabilization of the bluffs. Activity on the North Coast corridor will continue with construction on the HOV lanes from Palomar Airport Road to Carlsbad and to SR 78 in Oceanside. Completing the carpool HOV lanes to SR 78 will generate time savings that encourage carpooling in the North Coast corridor. Exciting progress is also being made at the future Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. Land has been acquired and highway and roadway connections are being completed that connect to the Port of Entry site. SANDAG and Caltrans are partnering on border wait time studies, traffic and revenue studies, and working directly with the Customs and Border Protection, Mexico, and the CHP to advance design, funding, and to reach the multi-party agreements with the goal of opening the new Port of Entry in 2024. SANDAG is engaged in the development, also engaged in development of the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, the CMCPs, which you've heard some of. In this fiscal year, 5 plans will be the focus of further development. Each CMCP is analyzing land use, employment, travel patterns, develop transportation alternatives that meet the need in each corridor and integrate with the other CMCPs, all leading to providing the board in FY22 with initial transportation mode alternatives, environmental and social justice analysis, and conceptual cost estimates. FY22 will see more projects starting construction. Construction will start this winter for the San Onofre to Pulgas project that will add double track and a low sand corridor on Camp Pendleton. This is another piece of the regional effort to double track the low sand corridor to increase passenger and freight service. The Bayshore Bikeway is being implemented in a series of projects. Currently, 75% of the 24 miles are complete. The Barrio Logan segment from the Bayshore Bikeway will begin construction on 2.5 miles of Class 1 bikeway on Harbor Drive, from Park Boulevard to 32nd Street in the city of San Diego. Construction will also begin on 6.5 miles of Borders of Bayshore Bikeway, connecting the San Ysidro Port of Entry with the Bayshore Bikeway at the Bikeway Village in the city of Imperial Beach. And then on Imperial Avenue, we'll be constructing the Imperial Avenue Bikeway with nearly 4 miles of urban on-street bikeways along Imperial Avenue in the city of San Diego. And this will connect to downtown. And so with that, I will hand the floor over to Ryan Ross to talk about the regional operations and services.
Thanks, John, and good morning, board members. I'm Ryan Ross, the Director of Regional Transportation Services. So the Regional Operations and Services budget consists of 19 projects that are driving the delivery of transportation programs and services that improve mobility and that expand the capabilities of local partner agencies. Some of these projects are among those most affected by the ongoing pandemic. As an example, when traffic initially decreased on the local highway system, that really impacted the SR 125 toll road and the I-15 express lanes. In fiscal year 2022, our focus will be on building these programs back up and further adapting to meet the evolving needs of the traveling public. In the case of SR 125 and the I-15, that will mean making operational improvements, and that will be supported by the completion of projects to upgrade our toll collection systems. With traffic expected to continue ramping up, our freeway service patrol program will be ready to improve public safety and help the transportation system operate more efficiently. In transportation demand management, we'll be conducting more outreach and education to help employers provide options to their employees when returning to work sites. We'll also be looking for ways to incentivize groups to rejoin our van pool program to reduce congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. And in our automated regional justice information system programs, better known as ARGIS, we'll be developing new public crime statistics reporting and mapping applications to provide even more value to our local agencies. I'll now hand it off to Colleen and Ray to talk about the overall work program section of the budget.
Thank you and good morning, board members. The overall work program includes many data modeling and planning projects, and these all directly align with the strategies that were laid out by Ray Trainer in the beginning about being a data-driven organization, to plan for a vibrant future and to bring the plan to life. And I think nothing embodies that more than the work we're doing with the regional plan. The first half of the fiscal year is really focused on completing the regional plan and getting that ready for this board to vote on at the end of the calendar year. This includes a substantial amount of data collection and analysis so that we can prepare the environmental document, further quantify the greenhouse gas reductions, assembling the data for member agencies for all of you to be able to update your climate action plans, and really do this in alignment with the regional plan. We also know that there's a lot of data and information that all of you are going to want to have as you prepare for this very important vote at the end of the calendar year. We'll also work on continuing to refine the equity framework and developing the regional digital equity strategy and action plan. We have pilot projects for flexible fleets. Those will get underway at the beginning of the fiscal year, and also looking at how we coordinate smart signals throughout the region. The second half of the fiscal year will focus on priority projects from the 2021 regional plan. Examples include putting the equity framework into action, getting the studies underway and assembling a task force to develop a congestion pricing program for the region, completing and continuing work on the comprehensive multimodal corridor studies that John referenced, and really doing these in alignment with the board of directors action in 2019, which prioritized certain corridors. Also working on the studies necessary to fund the regional plan. This is the detailed work needed to bring the various funding strategies to reality and to make the plan a reality. There are a number of ongoing efforts such as our habitat planning and mitigation program, updating the short range transportation plan. This is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as the RTIP, and aligning the RTIP along with the regional plan. And now Ray will talk about the data piece.
The culmination of nearly 2 years of modeling work on the regional plan will finally come together at the end of this year, which is the first half of fiscal 2022. As we complete the final modeling runs, we're going to be updating the performance measure outputs that everybody is waiting for and documentation that is absolutely necessary for the 2021 regional plan. We also know that the climate action plans are very important to each one of the jurisdictions. And with the completion of the model runs, we are going to provide modeling data such as mode share and VMT information, make that available to jurisdictions. We hope to make that available through a data accessible portal so that all jurisdictions can download any of the information that they need from SANDAG. And although the focus right now is on the 2021 plan, the modeling cycle, which is a 4-year cycle, is already underway for the 2025 plan. Project planning and data governance procedures for the 2025 plan are going to ramp up in the first half of FY22 with the preparation of all of the data and modeling requirements for the new plan. Work will begin on developing and fielding new transportation surveys needed for the 2025 plan. And in addition, the QA team will be implementing recommendations received from the triennial transit audit to enhance documentation and establish a proactive QA process for our new data products. The second half of the fiscal year is focused on the development of the new ABM3 model, which is a new version of the transportation model that's going to be needed to evaluate the 2025 plan. This requires a focus on project planning and project portfolio management, collection of data by fielding surveys for the regional plan, developing new regional forecasting models, processes and procedures, building the next generation platform for land use modeling, publishing sub-regional data to our data surfer for use by jurisdictions and the public, and creating a new data portal to disseminate data in an easy and understandable way. And of course, continued efforts to improve QA and QC procedures, along with increased focus on risk reduction, including the development of a priori test plans. As you've heard Hassan say, SANDAG is committed to becoming a data-driven organization. And this means more than just using data to develop the regional plan. It means embracing data as a transformational tool whereby we analyze our internal data to become more effective, more efficient, more transparent, and more accountable as an organization. Becoming internally data-driven starts in the second half of FY22 with the agency becoming data literate, where we lay the foundation for each department to be well-versed in collecting and analyzing data specific to their function and developing meaningful metrics such as key performance indicators by which we can objectively assess and improve our operations. And then we can report this information to interested parties such as you, the Board of Directors of SANDAG. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Ray Traynor.
Thanks, Ray. So here in the home stretch, I just wanted to try to wrap up the conversation. You've heard from our directors regarding the highlights of our proposed work plan for fiscal year 22 and as it's described in the draft fiscal year 22 budget. I think you'll acknowledge that we really are at a critical point, and the development and our proposed adoption of the fiscal year 22 budget is really a critical step as we see it in SANDAG's transformation into becoming a world-class organization. I just wanted to try to highlight 4 things that you can take away from today's conversation. And when you look at this fiscal year 22 budget, I think what you're going to see is it's going to help ensure that we can be appropriately and effectively responsive to the numerous audits and the reviews that have been conducted over the years, and to help to demonstrate that we're not wasting public resources. The second thing that I think is important for you to consider is that the adoption of the fiscal year 22 budget is going to continue to advance these priority projects, as well as the Transnet program of projects. Third, this budget's really going to enable us to be better positioned to be successful as we try to get the region to become more competitive for funding under reauthorization and any stimulus that may be coming here very soon. And lastly, we think it's critical because this is really important to help empower us, to transform us, to really fuel the changes that we've been talking about all this morning, and to help us continue to build the trust with the public. So as a part of today's presentation, I hope it's become evident that we have changed. It's not business as usual at SANDAG any longer. Our commitment to you is to continue to evolve, to continue to change. We recognize that the needs of the region are constantly shifting, and we have to be positioned to be agile and flexible to meet those needs. These changes that we're talking about require an inward look as well as an outward look, and we've tried to demonstrate for you the process that we've used has included stakeholders, members of the board, to help us define the why, the what, and the how. We talked about the framework and the infinity diagram and the fact that the work and the journey that we're on is ever evolving and continuous, but it's focused on the why, our vision and our mission. Fundamentally, this really guides everything that we're doing. And lastly, we've described the need that investments are required in order to be able to fuel the transformation that's underway. And we've talked about the benefits that will result. So what I'd like to do is to propose to you some next steps. So following your review and approval today, the next steps would be to return to the executive committee and to the board on May 14th with the proposed final fiscal year 22 program budget. So that brings us to the recommendation. So the executive committee recommends that the board of directors approve the draft fiscal year 22 program budget and the proposed budget adjustments along with the mission and the vision statements. So Chair Blake Spear, that concludes our presentation, and myself, Andre, Hassan, Jim, and the directors are available to be responsive to your questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that presentation. It's really clear from listening to that you've heard the board's request for more detail, and I really appreciate the effort that went into making that budget as digestible as $1 billion budget can be. So thank you very much. I see that we have board members with their hands up, but first I want to see if we have any public comments. Francesca?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Okay, so first let's go to Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you, Chair Blake Spear. Thank you again to both Rays and the entire staff for their presentation today. I would agree and echo the sentiment of Chair Blake Spear. The detail that was provided today and the information that we've received over the course of the last, not only few weeks, but months, the individual explanations, as well as just getting the background on why this is so important. I think it's really important that we move forward and that we continue to make SANDAG that world-class agency. The presentations that we received last meeting were impressive. It was amazing to hear nationwide perspectives that could be applied here in our own backyard and in our community. And so with that, I would like to make a motion to approve the executive committee's recommendation. And again, that is to approve the draft fiscal year 2022 SANDAG program budget, the proposed budget adjustments, and the vision and mission statements. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, and I'll go ahead and call on Mayor Salas.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank Hassan for prefacing this meeting with a reality check. I've been on this board for many years now, and the sea change in the organization is really, really refreshing. So in the past, we may have been, okay and happy with what was being presented to us, but it wasn't the full picture. And so having this hard look and having the realities before us is really, really good. So I really want to appreciate that, Hassan. I also wanted to say that, we as mayors, we know that when you cut administration, when you cut oversight to the bone, that a lot of times efficiencies really suffer and that waste can occur. And when you're looking at 133 projects that the current staff is managing, there's an awful lot of opportunity that things go by the wayside and things aren't, the oversight isn't there. As Mary Kay said, control weaknesses. So I really support the addition of the funding for the administration budget. I also had some questions though that I think require further justification. Is I know that when Hassan came in, he really took a deep look at staff and the tasks that they were doing. And so he did consolidate some positions and did not fill some vacancies. And so the question is, these 15 positions, how do they relate in the whole scheme of things? Positions that have not been filled, positions that were consolidated, and the net increase of the 15 positions, taking that into account. So I think that I'd like some more clarification on that. And then when we get to the operational budget, I have some questions regarding SR 125 and the expenditures, the future expenditures on the SR 125. And I want to thank you in advance that in item 15, we're going to take a deeper look at the operations of SR 125. So I'll reserve my comments on that. But that's the only thing that I had is, just a further explanation on the 15 positions.
Mayor Salas, I'll start and then if Ray want to contribute. We froze about 50 positions in the last fiscal year's budget. These 15 positions are really positioned in very specialized area. One in audit, several in data, and we can give you the list, but the whole staffing was structured such a way that we meet the need of things that we don't have inside. Other than that, we do internal recruitment. So yes, we froze 50 or so position, and those positions still frozen, but these are needed. Right, Ray, want to add to this?
Yeah, that's correct, Hassan. And Mayor Salas, as you alluded to, we did cut those vacancies last year, and we tried to do our best to cover all of our bases, but we've determined through the course of this last year that these 15 positions we've proposed are absolutely necessary if we're going to make changes and advance in the areas that Hassan talked about. So not only are we proposing some positions to support quality assurance, as well as our data analytics, we've got some work in the area of our workforce development and utilization. We've got a couple positions proposed, as Andre indicated, to help bolster our finance team, which when you talk to the lending institutions, they've recognized that SANDAG is probably the most active issuer right now. And we're doing this with really no dedicated staff. And so we've got a couple positions to support Andre's work in that area. We also have a position supporting us in human resources because we have begun that modernization work, and we're developing a new enterprise resource management tool. And we're going to need a staff member in human resources to help us as we go through that implementation. So that is a summary of the positions that we've proposed. And I know I can also call on my colleagues if you'd like some additional clarifications, Mayor.
Okay, no, that's fine. And with that explanation, I'll be happy to second the motion that's been made by Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Musgrove.
Yes, good morning. Quick question on that same issue that the mayor raised. The positions that were frozen, there had to be appropriations for those positions. What happened to the funds with those positions? And secondly, are we looking back, since we're talking about equity, are we going to look back at those positions that were frozen and the incumbents and look back at them to see if they can be brought back? And lastly, when we say deleted, frozen, and different terms, they have different meanings within county government. So frozen positions are still there, appropriations are still made. I'm just curious to know what happened to the funds if we're looking for an increase in funding to pay for new positions. And with the 1% to 2% adjustment on administrative fees, where are the cuts going to be made to pay for those? Thank you.
Let me just start and then Ray can join. Thank you for your question. The frozen position not frozen, they were eliminated. They were no longer vacancies. The money that were budgeted for this position were put back in the budget and were spent in different things. So therefore, we're not gonna come back next year and say, let us bring these 50 positions back. Every budget, we're gonna tell you what our staffing need, and this budget is same. So they're not just frozen, they were eliminated from the budget last year, and that's gonna continue to be this year and until we tell you otherwise. I think the staff outlined we're talking about $3.2 million additional requests from Transnet, and those $3.2 million went into the categories that the staff went over. I hope that answered your question. And if not, I'll have Andre or Ray respond to the specifics of your question.
Well, if we're going to increase by 3.2 million, we have finite money. So if we're moving 3.2 million from operation to administration, what in operation is being adjusted to account for that transference of funds? And I'll wait for Ray's response. Thank you.
Councilmember Musgrove, if I can take that question. So specifically on attachment 6, there's a spreadsheet that shows that you're right, the amount of administrative fees is going up by 3.2 million. And so there's obviously a zero-sum game. And so there's a decrease to each of the allocations. So if you direct yourself to attachment 6, it lists all the monies that are being taken away from the other various programs. So I'll pause if you want to get to that attachment 6, if you have any further questions on that.
No, I don't, but I think it would be very helpful for the board members if, because this is a pretty significant ask, instead of referring back to attachments, which we're now hearing, and I know there's a lot to go through, 1,300 pages, and I looked through most of them. That would have been nice to hear on the initial proposal as to where those cuts are being made apportionately, and realizing it's probably not coming out of one particular project, but out of several. So thank you very much for your response. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Spriggs. We're still not hearing you.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I actually had a very related question to the last one, and a comment. And although I'm an alternate, I've been on and off the board meetings for years now, and have a lot of experience as a retired senior manager at UC San Diego in large budgets. I think, you know, I have a lot of respect for Hassan's breathing of new life into SANDAG and his vision of the need to bolster the organization and become a lot more forward thinking regarding regional transportation and other regional issues. And I think inherently a certain amount of deference is due to his plan to bolster our staffing to enable those efforts to take place. But there's also a bit of caution, I think, that needs to be stated. And with regard to the last question, when you look at attachment 14 and the regional transportation allocations, you can see where the reductions have taken place to generate the $3.3 million. And they basically come out of the share of funds directly passed through. There are pass-throughs to the cities, about 1%. So we've all taken a 1% reduction there going forward to 2022. About $1 million from major corridor projects. So that's about $2 million. And another 0.5 from transit system improvements, and then there's various sums from other sources. So, we're seeing in one way of looking at this is the sort of traditional balancing act between program side and staffing to make those programs more effective. And in a way, it's the shifting now to back to the internal staffing to make programs more effective at the expense of programs that, as elected officials, our cities, our constituents see and enjoy and appreciate. And that's the side of SANDAG that people like, and that where SANDAG gets its support. So this balancing act between programmatic cuts on one hand and staffing increases on the other needs to take into consideration the fact that SANDAG really does have programs on the ground that are going to be, I won't say sacrificed, but cut back at the margin in order to accommodate this, and that those programs are popular and enjoyed by all of us and all of our constituents. So I guess, excuse me, my question is, going forward beyond this year's budget, do we see more such shifts in the balance between internal staffing and internal controls and planning and grant seeking and other important functions at the expense of the program side? Or is this pretty much what we can expect going forward, and really not a lot more of these sorts of budgetary shifts? That's my question.
Thank you, Council Member. I will start and then have the staff chime in. We're not expecting to change Transnet allocation for administration beyond this moving forward. Having said that, I also want to assure you that yes, there were $1 million cuts for all the 18 cities in the county and some cuts for our transit agencies. But given where we are right now and given the fact that they're going to be, they talk about the stimulus funds in Washington and Sacramento, I think these staffing will become critical. And while we're asking for $3.2 million, this could translate into much more additional funds coming to the region. So we're very conscious. I would assure you that none of the programs is going to suffer as a result. Yes, there will be a reduction in the margin, like you indicated correctly. But this is not something we're going to come to you every year and say, let us increase the administration fee. I think this request is consistent with where this agency is going to go, and also consistent with our desire to compete better in your behalf as cities and counties for funds that actually might be more available, especially nationally, than otherwise.
I really appreciate those assurances, and I'll certainly be, and I'm sure the board will be paying attention to this issue as we go forward in the future. Thank you. I've got a frog in my throat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. I appreciate staff's presentation. I have a couple items I'd like to discuss that I've prepared in the review of this. I think as a board member, as board members, we not only have a responsibility to make decisions based on state laws and legislation, but also, as an elected official, we're accountable to the public on approving this budget and the staffing needs, and ultimately justifying the cost of the major RTP that will come before us and the budgets allocated for that. And I see a lot of budgeted positions for data and research and those sort of important dynamics. And as an example, the data and reports that I've reviewed assumes on this future RTP that the staff will be working on, that we're allocating, assumes only a 10% ridership, but that's a fraction in comparison to the investment in why haven't we been able to increase existing ridership with current infrastructure? Those are just some questions. No other jurisdictions have been able to meet state requirements surrounding housing and climate change policies. And as a consequence, we continue putting the impossible into a plan and budget, and time again fail to deliver on goals and promises, all the while spending billions. And I know this is just a program budget, but this program budget is building into the vision of the 5 big moves, and all of this must be taken into consideration. Let's be accountable to the public we serve and realistically move on a plan that considers financial criteria and realistic underlying assumptions that greatly influence outputs and the plan. Here are some questions that I'm going to present now. I don't necessarily expect an answer, but it is something I'm going to really dig into and ensure that myself and my colleagues on the board are able to make informed decisions as we move forward after this item and eventually approving this budget. 1, what is your criteria in choosing or selecting the underlying assumptions that influence staff's data, models, and planning? For example, the state VMT mandated by the state is probably one. What else is assumed? Any financial criteria, such as meeting the state mandated vehicle miles traveled at the fastest and cheapest possible price? Tangible examples of the current RTP that current staff has put together has loaded assumptions that the current RTP model uses 2 cents or assumes 2 cents per vehicle mile traveled. Why did SANDAG staffers and the planners choose 2 cents versus 1 cent versus 0 cents? What was the reasons for 2 cents, and why not present other options that are more financially responsible and still meet goals? Lastly, what assumptions were not used? This is huge. Or considered, and why not? What other assumptions were considered, and why did you decide not to apply them? For example, high-speed rail instead of buses, or even hard rail versus light rail versus electric fleets. The goal is to mitigate for climate change. The goal is to orientate our community to benefit from using public transit and lowering GHGs and preparing for sea level rise. But we also have to be smart about it. And we also need these underlying assumptions to present all sides of the picture so that us as a board, we can make an informed decision that's realistic. As a board member, I want to ensure that I fully understand the criteria that is being set and to ensure that we have considered various unbiased possibilities and included these assumptions into the model. We're about to hire some staff on data. This is very, very important that we include these assumptions into the model to see what other possibilities or options might be based on multiple variables and other assumptions. This is all about presentations. SANDAG staff works super hard to put presentations together, but I know, being a data guy, that depending on the data you input and the underlying assumptions you input, you can get whatever outcome you want. And we really have to be aware of that in moving forward. Lastly, I would like to ask Hassan, as we move forward on these big decisions and we increase the budget to include much needed staff positions, I did not see any added positions for Mary Kay and her audit team. I can only imagine the schedule they're on and how overwhelmed they are. I would like to see some additional positions funded for the outside auditing firm. I think that it's in the best interest of the public for transparency and this board.
Councilmember Rodriguez, on your last point, we do have one added position to Mary Kay, our independent auditor, and I won't dispute that more resources probably will be needed, but we did add one position out of the 15 for the independent performance auditor.
Thank you. Yeah, so if staff wants to quickly answer some of those questions related to the budget, but some of them are deeper, it sounds like, related to the regional plan. And we want to make sure that all board members have their questions answered. And I know that the SANDAG staff is putting together answers to all of the board member questions on the regional plan so that we can have a robust discussion about that. If staff wanted to briefly answer some of the questions around the budget part, and then we'll go on to the remainder of the comments.
If I understood, Councilmember Rodriguez is mainly on the assumption, financial assumptions in the regional transportation plan, 5 big moves. We'll be more than happy to sit with the council member and answer his questions. I don't remember a question on the budget, but we'll be happy to answer it if there is one that I don't remember.
Okay, did Ray Trainer have a quick answer?
I was going to make the same response, Chair.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we have Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Sorry, hi, trying to unmute. Thank you so much, Chair Blakespear. I just had a couple of thoughts and comments. I mean, I think that it's possibly beyond the scope of the current item, but it's clear that the completion of the Midcoast is going to have pretty serious consequences for the availability of construction employment in our region. And the consistency of employment and the ability of folks in our community to build careers clearly has important long-term consequences for our economy and our local labor force. So this is a question for staff. It might be, again, something we need to continue later if it's too complex, but I'm curious, I'm wondering if we've thought through the impacts that the Midcoast employment drop-off is likely to have for our local workforce. What's our plans around labor smoothing, and how long of an interval do we anticipate before that quantity and quality of jobs are likely to come back online from SANDAG projects in particular?
Thank you for your question. Very quickly, of course, we think about that. I think not only that the region need to maintain an employment that's really critical. We're looking at a lot of possibilities in bringing funding and continuing, for example, the North Coast Corridor. We have about $600 million worth of shovel-ready project in the Los Angeles Corridor. We have the project that's going in North Mesa too. The question is, would we have the local funding, the local match to put on the table when we compete for federal and state dollars? We're thinking about that actually extensively, and as Ray Trainer probably will elaborate, this is a big part of why we think added resources is needed, because as the Midcoast get finished next year, our capital program is going to go down. And that does not mean the Midcoast is the end of the story. It's actually the beginning of the story.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Minto.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's very interesting to hear the comments. When you get an agenda item like this, it certainly brings out a lot of questions. And this is almost like could have been a complete workshop for one day in itself, or one meeting in itself. I'm impressed by the professionalism of the presentation, professionalism of the staff. And I think that after sitting here for many years, just like Mayor Salas, that we're hearing more information come out of staff than we ever have in the past. And just like when I have my budget hearings for my city, sometimes we don't always understand everything that comes up at once because it is very comprehensive. And so I think that we can have some follow-up meetings to this, not necessarily as something to approve, but more necessarily to make sure that it's understood. And the reason why I say that is because not only do some of the, many of the board members aren't trained in these items, however, neither are the public. So the public might be benefited by having some of the modeling explained, how you arrived at some of these decisions. And because I think Chris was right, data is data. What you put in is what you get out. And I think if we understand more about what you're putting in, we understand more about what's coming out of it. And so I would like to see something in the future where we actually see how the modeling is done and how we arrive at some of these decisions. And I believe that it's also necessary to make sure you have the right staffing, current staffing. If that's all you need, then that's all you need. But if you need more, then you should get more. One of the terms that I hate most is that we're going to do more with less. And when you have less employees, well, then the existing employees certainly have to do more, but they're getting less. And less could be a variety of things: less time off, less compensation, and things of that nature. So I like the idea of bringing on more staff when necessary. And since we have reduced staff over the years, maybe it is time to bring back staffing. And I think that it's great to look at this budget and say, let's be as conservative as we can in putting the information or spending the money. But also, I want to remind everybody that sometimes while you're pinching the pennies, dollars can walk out the door. So I like what I'm seeing, like what I'm hearing, and I really like the comprehensive questioning and comments that other board members are making. Thank you for this time, and thank you for the presentation.
Well, thank you, Mayor Mento. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. I'll try to make my comments very brief. We've been asking SANDAG to do more and more with regards to information, working with communities, dealing with equity. And at the same time, last year, there was a reduction in the staffing level and amount of support. So I think it's really time for us to support the staff and these needs for increasing their budget. After Councilman Spriggs made his comment about the 1% from each city, I did some quick math. I've been asking SANDAG for more data on mode share to support our climate action plan here in La Mesa. But when I heard that they're going to be able to do that better this coming year, and then I looked at how much this 1% is going to cost, which is a little over $16,000 for the city of La Mesa, close to $17,000. I couldn't buy that kind of data with $17,000 if I went to the market for the city of La Mesa. This is a bargain in terms of the kind of information and support we get from SANDAG for our city climate action plan, this kind of data. So I welcome this shift and more investment to help our cities do the work we need to do. And ultimately, we're going to make huge savings if we're successful in terms of health, adverse health effects in our communities. So I'm all for this. I think it's high time that we move in this direction and support SANDAG's budgetary needs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Sorry, I wasn't done with my part, and I apologize. I've taken up a lot of time. I was wanting to make an alternative motion than the motion that's been made and seconded that's on the floor. As we move into the season and the staffing grows and just the amount of information that's going to be coming at us, it is absolutely essential that the outside auditing firm under Mary Kay's leadership has the resources and the manpower to support the board for complete public transparency as we move forward on making decisions that's going to cost taxpayers billions and with high expectation. And so my alternative motion for me to get on board with this draft budget, I would like to see 3 of the 7 new staff members that Mary Kay requested be added to this budget. I know within the budget, it's only approving 1. I would like that number to be 3 in order for me to get on board. So that's my alternative motion.
Second.
Was that Mayor Hall?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. There's a motion on the and a second on an alternate motion. So we'll go ahead and vote.
Thank you. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall. Mayor Hall, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Dallas, no.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Councilmember Donovan.
Donovan, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Lawson Reamer, no.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland. Oh, Mayor Gasterland is absent. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Councilmember Martinez.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember Spriggs.
No.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Shu.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, no.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, no.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss. I apologize. Mayor Voss is the City of Poway is absent. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
No.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Councilmember Musgrove.
Musgrove, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Hebner.
Hebner, no.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much. And that motion does not pass.
Okay. So let's return to the original motion, which was from Mayor Sotelo Solis, seconded by Mayor Salas.
For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Councilmember Donovan.
Donovan, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland. Oh, I'm sorry. The City of Del Mar is absent. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of Imperial Beach, Councilmember Spriggs.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Shu.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Oceanside, no.
Thank you. The City of Poway is absent. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Councilmember Musgrove.
Musgrove, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Hebner.
Hebner, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much. And that motion does pass.
Okay, thank you. We are now on to our next item, which is number 15. This is the South Bay Expressway State Route 125 overview, and this is discussion. So I'll hand it over to staff. Could you just let me know in advance of this item if we have any public comments so far?
No, Chair, we don't have any hands raised from the public.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair and board members. We appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion with you today. Here's an outline of what we are planning to cover in the presentation as part of this item. We can go to the next slide. We know that especially for some of our newer board members, that this may be one of the first times you've received information about SR 125. So we'll start with a high-level overview and history of the toll road. Then we'll look at some data to better understand who's using SR 125 and the average tolls that are being collected. I will then turn it over to Andre, and he's going to present an overview of the road's financial status and outlook, including the current debt structure and schedule. And then Colleen is going to conclude the presentation by talking about how SR 125 will fit into the upcoming work as the 2021 Regional Transportation Plan is developed. Next slide. So the South Bay Expressway is a 10-mile tolled stretch of SR 125 that connects Chula Vista, Otay Mesa, and Mexico with East County, downtown San Diego, and the rest of the regional freeway network. The history and planning of the road goes all the way back to 1989. That's when AB 680 authorized Caltrans to enter into agreements with private entities for the construction of up to 4 toll projects around the state. SR 125 became one of those projects, and that was because at the time there was no financing or plan of any kind to build out the southern segment of the corridor. So that legislation paved the way for a public-private partnership that accelerated the construction of the toll road. And the project was able to open to traffic in 2007, long before what otherwise would have been possible had it not been a toll road. Toll collection has always been a critical financing component of SR 125 ever since the project was first conceptualized. And that's an important point to make, that the reason why tolls are collected on 125 is because of financial obligations and the need to pay off outstanding debt. And that's different than, say, the I-15 express lanes, where tolls support a congestion management strategy. Next slide, please. So how did SANDAG become involved with SR 125 and become responsible for its operations? Well, in the initial years after the road first opened, revenue collection was falling well short of original projections. And that ultimately led the former private operator to file for bankruptcy. SANDAG at that time recognized that there was an opportunity and was able to purchase the lease to operate the toll road in late 2011 at a 35% discount for a total cost of $341 million. That was really a strategic decision, an investment that was made by the board in an effort to both reduce congestion on the 805, and also because the board knew that because of the discounted purchase price, they'd have the ability to lower the toll rates by up to 40% to attract new traffic. As part of the purchase, SANDAG, as the new leaseholder, entered into what's known as the development franchise agreement with Caltrans, who's actually the owner of the road. That agreement assigns a number of different responsibilities to SANDAG. And so to support a business model that delivers on all of those requirements, SANDAG employs staff in customer service, roadway operations, finance, IT, and other departments that all play a role in operating the toll road effectively. Next slide. So there are currently roughly 57,000 accounts with Fast Track on SR 125. And these are some of the most regular users of the road. The map on the left shows geographically where those accounts are located. You can see that they're spread throughout the entire region, but that the highest numbers are directly along the 125 corridor, and that's where you see kind of the darker orange colored hexagons. Roughly 50% of Fast Track accounts reside in the city of Chula Vista. To better understand the income level of those Fast Track customers, we can then look at the map on the right that shows the percentage of low-income households throughout parts of the county. The areas adjacent to the toll road corridor where the most customers live have less than 30%, or in some areas less than 20% of total households that are defined as low income, as compared to if you look west of the 805, where the percentage of low income goes up to 40 and 50% of households. So as I mentioned, Fast Track represents the majority of the trips that are taken on SR 125. That's about 77%. Those tolls are automatically deducted from prepaid accounts, and the rates are less than the cash and credit card toll rates. You can see on the map to the right, the Fast Track rates for the different trip segments on the corridor. I mentioned in an earlier slide that the board lowered toll rates in 2012. That was really somewhat of an unprecedented move. It was actually the first time, and still to date, one of the only times that any toll operator in the country actually reduced tolls rather than increasing them. And those same rates remain in effect today. So as time has passed and inflation has occurred, the tolls have remained flat, which now means that they're actually some of the lowest tolls in the state. The average toll per one-way trip on SR 125 is $1.90. And if we look at how that adds up over an entire month for our fast track customers, they're paying on average right around $37 in tolls per month. I will now turn it over to Andre, and he's going to talk about the road's financial plan, including the debt service structure and schedule.
Thank you, Ryan. So, when the toll road was purchased out of bankruptcy in 2011, we inherited some pretty onerous TIFIA loans with a combined rate of over 7%, plus some of the repayment had an ascending structure. And as you can see from the blue bar starting in 2028 all the way through 25, there was a fairly steep ascending structure, plus a very big bullet payment of $94 million in 2043, which meant that at some point we would probably have to increase our tolls to cover debt service. So in 2017, after we demonstrated 5 years of solid operations, we were actually able to go to the financial markets, issue new bonds, and pay off the TIFIA loan. The new rate that we got was at 3.3%, which is less than half of what we were paying. We also were able to structure the new bonds so that we would have a level debt service through 2043. So you can see that green bar is currently where we are at today. And by the way, this was the first time that the TIFIA office had ever allowed a borrower to get out of a loan facility that was doing well. So it was a big win for the region. You can see overall, we saved $147 million in cash flow savings over the prior debt that we had. Next slide. Clearly the toll road was not in great financial shape when SANDAG purchased it out of bankruptcy. In fact, the facility was rated a BBB by the rating agencies. However, based on the strong operational results over the years, the toll facility has gradually been upgraded 5 times, and we are now rated A+ by both S&P and Fitch, which is one of the higher ratings for a single facility toll road. Now, this slide shows 5 key credit factors that the rating agencies pay close attention to in allowing us to receive an A+ rating. Now, you just heard from our budget from fiscal year 22. Out of all the main components, the toll roads on SR 125 and I-15 have been most impacted by COVID. So I just want to take a moment and take a look at each one of the blue bullets and where we stand today versus where we were in the past. So strong and growing use of the roadways. So the annual trips from 2013 to 2019 gradually increased year over year. Now, because of COVID hitting back in February of last year, our last quarter was significantly impacted. And you can see overall, our trips decreased by 7.5%. We continue to see a deterioration this year, although it's stabilized, but we still see that there'll be an 11% decrease in trips for the remainder of this year for 2021. As far as increasing revenues, the next bullet, the annual revenues basically increased from 2013 to 2019, although we didn't increase rates, basically was because of more usage. But when COVID hit, overall, we had a 10% reduction in revenues, and we see a further reduction this year of approximately 18%. Now, the next bullet, expenses are carefully controlled. I guess you can see those bullets are in green, basically because as traffic did decrease, we were able to decrease some of our expenses. And so in 2020, we've seen a decrease of 5% of our expenses. And this year, we continue to see potentially a 6% decrease as well. Now, next bullet is conservative debt service. We basically don't have any other debt on except for what we initially took out. We don't expect any future debt. But I just want to go to the last bullet, the prudent legal structure. There's some covenants that we have as part of our bond indenture. And the very last one, you see the 1.5 time rate covenant. I'll get to that in one of the upcoming slides. Next slide. This slide is just a depiction, a visual depiction of what I talked about earlier. You can see we reduced rates back in 2012 when we first took over, and you can see gradually year over year, we had an increase through 2019, and when COVID hit, we decreased for the first time by 7.5%, and this year we're projecting reduction potentially by 11%. Next slide. So this slide shows our revenues and expenses since we refinanced our old debt for 2018 through 2020, and the estimate for fiscal year 21, which we are approximately 3/4 of the way through. So our revenues come from four main sources, the toll revenues being the most significant, followed by violation revenues, other revenues, which include minimum monthly usage, lost damage transponder fees or rental income, and lastly, interest income. And less our operating expenses gives our annual net revenue. So per our bond covenants, we have to maintain at least a 1.5 times debt service coverage ratio. And if our debt is basically level at $13.8 million per year. So if you take a look at the green numbers on the screen, you can see back in 2018 through 2020, we had really good coverage. In 2018, it was 2.3 times. In 2019, 2.21. In fiscal year 2020, we fell because of COVID at 1.95. And currently, we obviously, again, 3/4 of the year through, we see that our debt service coverage should be able to achieve the 1.5 times. However, if we fall below that number, per our bond covenants, we are required to hire a third-party independent traffic consultant to review our operations. Now, clearly, there's two sides of this ledger, the expenses and our revenues. Now, expenses, we've been able to keep relatively low. In fact, our expenses, even at the high in 2019, was significantly lower than the previous operators. So we've done a very good job in maintaining our expenses at a fairly low level. The other thing that they'll look at is revenues. And since we haven't increased our toll revenues, toll fees since 2012, there's a potential that the study could tell us that we may need to increase our tolls. But again, this is 2021 is not over yet. Once we get to the end of this fiscal year, we'll determine whether we need to hire that consultant or not. Now, the last slide that we'll take a look at is our current cash balances. I apologize, there's a lot of numbers over here, but the numbers in blue are basically the balances that we have to keep on hand for our bond indenture. And then the capital fund is where the most amount of money is at. And Ryan will take a look at a little more detail what the capital fund needs are. But if we can focus on just the two last lines. So if we look at fiscal year 2020, which is the last audited year, you can see that the total cash balance on hand is $108 million, and our outstanding bond balance is $182 million. So even if we wanted to pay off the toll road today, we couldn't. We'd be $74 million short. However, even if we wanted to pay the debt off today, we would not be able to, because when we issued the bonds back in 2017, we had a 10-year par course. So in other words, we can't basically get out of the bonds till 2027. And if we just focus on the very last numbers in 2027, those are obviously projected numbers going forward, but we show that even in 2027, we couldn't pay off the toll road because we don't have the sufficient cash even in 2027. Now, clearly, these are estimates going out 7 years, and these could substantially change based on commuting patterns and what happens past the pandemic. But it's obviously something that staff is monitoring closely, and we'd get back on an annual basis to the board and let you know where we're at. With that, I'll just turn to the next slide, and Ryan can tell you a little bit more about our capital program.
So under the franchise agreement SANDAG has with Caltrans that I mentioned earlier, SANDAG is required to maintain the assets of SR 125 in a state of good repair, which means the revenue we collect not only goes towards covering our debt and operating expenses, but it also funds a detailed capital maintenance and improvement program that is needed for maintenance, repairs, and future improvements. There is authorizing legislation that limits the types of projects eligible to receive SR 125 funds. It states that a project must improve the operation of the 125 corridor. Our capital program is reviewed and updated annually, and this year includes work to connect the 125 to the 905 and SR 11. It also includes projects that will replace our toll collection systems that have reached the end of life, and the overlaying of new payment on all of the entry and exit ramps. So we hope that gives you a good overview and kind of sense of where things currently stand from a financial and operational perspective. But we also know that equally as important to this conversation is where we go from here and contemplating what the future of SR 125 looks like. So I'm going to pass it over to Colleen to talk about how this all fits in with the 2021 regional plan.
Thanks, Ryan. And, I think as we look at State Route 125 today, it really appears to function sort of on its own as a sort of just a toll road on its own. But the 2021 regional plan really looks at State Route 125 as part of the overall connected system, and really part of our overall complete corridor, is a key link from the international borders to our borders with Riverside and Orange counties. And in fact, the regional plan proposes that by 2035, the SR 125 would have 2 general purpose lanes in each direction with a managed lane in each direction. And as Mayor Salas and Mayor Satellis-Lease know, because of their work in the comprehensive multimodal study that we're doing, the South Bay to Sorrento study, that we're looking at the role State Route 125 plays in comparison to South I-5, South I-805, the Blue Line, the proposed Purple Line commuter rail line, and really how all of this functions as a system. So one of the things we also wanted to mention is that with this corridor study going on, we're actually looking at the possibility of repurposing some of that existing right-of-way to really maximize the use of this facility. And really the other aspect of this is that while this is a toll road today, we're talking about an entire transportation system that will involve pricing, as we discussed with the panelists at the meeting on March 12th with you all. And one of the first implementation actions after the regional plan is approved is to look at what would an overall pricing strategy look like for the region, and actually putting together a task force to help us do that. So that concludes our presentation, and I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you. I know Mayor Salas had some questions or comments she'd like to share, so I think I'll call on her first. If you are a member of the public wishing to speak, please make sure you have your hand up. And Francesca, let me know if anybody does.
So first of all, thank you for that presentation, and I really appreciate that, but it still leaves a lot of questions unanswered that I would like to have answered. And first of all, I'd like to thank Hassan, our Executive Director, and Andre for really providing our staff, for this presentation, and also in working with the Chula Vista staff for over a year now. So I really appreciate that. And this issue is something that I've been working on ever since I came to SANDAG, which was going on 7 years now. It's the reaction that I got before was like talking to a brick wall. So I really appreciate the cooperation of staff, and it's really a welcome change. So, I think the motivation that I'm going with this is that South County really has a jobs housing imbalance. And there's about 80,000 people that commute northward into San Diego and beyond each workday. And this creates a very challenging one-directional freeway gridlock in the morning and the PM. And the interregional commutes would be better and balance the creation of jobs in South County and Chula Vista. But we've heard directly from businesses that one of the barriers or impediments to them wanting to locate to the eastern parts of Chula Vista or East Otay Mesa is that the toll would add significant cost to employees that were trying to get to their final destination and workplace. So the early retirement of the SR 125 toll facility debt will increase the balance for mobility demands and actually reduce vehicle miles traveled in our community and in our region. So incentivizing businesses to locate in South County would help alleviate the transportation congestion over our region's freeways by more fully utilizing the existing capacity that exists along the South Canyon Freeway and arterials when commuting south in the morning and evening. And the shift would allow billions of dollars that would have been spent to widen transportation corridors to transit projects and other endeavors. And that would help to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled from the South Bay to current northern employment centers. So the bonds are callable in 2027, provided that SANDAG can accomplish a number of things. And the first is to address the gap of $22 million between the projected cash on hand of $120.29 million and the remaining debt of $143 million in 2027. And then the second part of that is terminating the franchise agreement with Caltrans in 2028 or earlier in order to set aside funds for the payoff of the debt. And we know that that's going to be another heavy lift and challenge, but I believe that we can get through it. So if you call the bonds, SANDAG can actually save $90 million in cost. And that could be achieved by, if the road is then transferred to Caltrans and you no longer need improvements on the tolling facilities, there's budgeted in the new tolling system of $62 million. And then we wouldn't have to bear the roadway improvements to 2028 to 2043. And that's another $27 million. So you see that we can really narrow that gap. So based on a review of publicly available documents and documents provided by SANDAG staff that were provided to the City of Chula Vista staff, I would like to ask that we place on a future SANDAG agenda to follow-up action item on the South Bay Expressway to recommend the direction be provided to the SANDAG Board of Directors and to the Executive Director and staff to develop options to call the bonds in 2027 as part of the annual financial planning and budget process, starting with fiscal year 2021-2022, and to begin discussions with Caltrans to terminate the franchise agreement in 2028 or earlier, and report to the board quarterly on staff's program, and to assist Caltrans in securing additional funding to absorb the addition of SR 125 into their existing network earlier than they had anticipated. And as a part of efforts to find possible additional savings and to ensure sufficient funds will be available to pay off the debt, which that is really important. But if you look at the revenues and the expenses, and you look at what's going into the reserve funds, so this year was an off year. I don't believe that the coming years that I believe that we're going to actually see increased traffic on the SR 125. So I would like our independent auditor to do the following if possible, because I know that she's impacted. So the audit committee will have to put this into their scope of work. To review all positions charged to the SR 125 fund, to determine the personnel cost being charged to the SR 125, and if the charges are reasonable and appropriate. And then to determine the appropriate allocation of CalPERS and OPBEB pension cost allocated to the SR 125 fund, and to review the overhead allocations to the SR 125 and to determine where that's an appropriate share of the cost. Then to identify expenditures and compliance for allocations to CIP projects outside of the SR 125 site, if any, and to determine proper allocation of interest earned to the SR 125 fund. And I would request that the review cover the years from 2017 and 2020. And I'd like to know from Mary Kay if that type of audit is something that she can do in a timely manner. And by doing these actions in combination with SANDAG's effort to create a new port of entry in Otay Mesa and creating new transit hubs in the South County and expanded transit options going east to west and connecting UC San Diego and the Blue Line trolley to the new growth areas east of the 805 in Chula Vista and the southern portion of San Diego, we will create the much needed economic development growth in Otay Mesa and Chula Vista and throughout South County. And that is far too long. That issue has really been a matter of equity for our community. And just to restate is that this is really important to us. And, you know, if you look at what Colleen said about looking at the regional transportation plan and approving the RTIP and then going back and reviewing pricing for using freeways, I mean, you know, the South County is bearing the brunt of all of this. And we believe that just like Mary Kay said, when you don't have, you know, that when you don't have that oversight, there could be opportunities for savings that we don't know, and certainly that our public, especially those in the South County, have been asking for years. You know, why are we the only communities that have a toll road and others don't? So that's my request, and I hope I get the support of the board to do that when the item comes forward in the future.
Okay, thank you. So I think this item's not agendized for a vote, so I think that we can just ask staff to come back to us with something and to work together with you to do that. I know there was a lot of specificity in what you were saying. So can we just confirm with the attorney that that works?
It does work on both of those. Any member can request that an item be agendized. That has been done now. And ultimately, it would be appropriate maybe for the audit committee. They're the ones who control the overall audit plan and the budget necessary to do that. And the first step toward getting an audit started would probably be to bring that to the audit committee and for them to look at an amendment to the current audit plan to include that and to bring that back to you as the board as a ratification of their action on that.
And that would be my request. Thank you.
And Mayor Blackspear, let me just make one quick comment. Mayor Salas, first of all, thank you very much. Probably not many board members know, but before I decided to apply for the job, I met with Mayor Salas in her office, and I was impressed by her straightforward manner then, and I'm still impressed today. As I promised you, we're going to work with you on all of those issues you raised. We'll agendize it, and we will have a discussion that's honest and truthful. I do want to address one thing you said. You know, why is the South Bay has the only toll road in San Diego? I mean, we have the I-15, and that's when I talk about equity and the sins of the past. That's something we take very seriously. You're going to hear a lot from us in the 5 big moves like Colleen outlined. That equity is a major consideration, and anything that would hurt minorities, low income, is hopefully with your help going to be presented to you, and you're going to deal with it. So I want to thank you for your comments. We take it seriously, and we'll agendize it, and we'll have more discussion about it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that although, you know, during the presentation, it was stated that the people in Eastern Chula Vista have higher incomes. That's just small pockets of neighborhoods in Chula Vista in the East area that skew everything else, right? Our community, we can take pride that when we've developed our housing, we've put a balanced mix of affordable along with the few estate housings that we do have in the East. But certainly the incomes of those higher level people do skew the economics of that area. And just another thing is that, you know, Amazon is going to build a huge facility out in the East Otay Mesa. And we know that the workers will be coming from East County, from North County to take those jobs. And wouldn't it be better to save the vehicle miles traveled than them making the huge loop down the 54, down the 805 and back up to the 905 to get to their destination? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Salas. So we are just close right up at noon. We have 2 more board members with their hands up. So I'll go ahead and call on you. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you. I'll try to be fast in my comments. First of all, I appreciate Mayor Salas's work in terms of trying to reduce the cost of the bond. However, last week, and as Colleen mentioned, we learned that road use pricing, toll roads, congestion pricing is an important tool to use in terms of addressing not only pollution, but the cost of transportation in general and equity issues. And as we just saw in this presentation, the use of 125 toll road is largely being used by people with money. And as they travel north, they pollute communities that have less money. And essentially, we have a environmental justice issue. People in La Mesa, people in El Cajon, others are suffering from the use of 125 as they travel north, and then hit 52 going to Serrano Valley, as we know, a certain percentage do, and congesting that roadway. That's the impact. If we take away the toll road or the toll on 125, it's going to have an adverse impact on all of our communities in East County. And I'm talking about increased asthma, cancer, and as well as congestion. So I think when we look at these kinds of issues, we have to be comprehensive and know that charging road use fees or using congestion pricing is the way of the future if we want to reduce congestion, reduce pollution, and improve our health in our communities. So I ask that if we do come to this agenda item again, that we not just look at the cost, but we also look at the health impacts. We look at the regional transportation network and how much, if we take away the cost of traveling on 125 this whole road now, what it will do to my congestion problems in La Mesa and on 52. The real solution here is that if we want to price roads, we need to price all of our roads. And that's how we can tell a business person that's considering businesses in South County to say that, you know, because all these roads are going to cost, it makes sense to make your businesses here in South County close to where people live. And I think that's the important thing as we go forward. Thank you very much.
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, I think that when I'm hearing that it will cause negative impacts to the East County people, I think actually it will be helpful because you're not going to have the huge congestion on the SR 125 and other roadways. You're going to create another method of getting somewhere quickly and not sitting in traffic idling. The second point is, you're right, it should be a matter of social equity. But we know that if there's going to be congestion pricing in the future, it's going to take a long time to do it. So I'm hearing that it's okay to, you know, put that burden on South County residents, which are the poorest community. And I think that it's not true that, let's put it this way. It may be true that more affluent people can afford a toll now, but if you made that movement less expensive for others, as we saw when SANDAG reduced the tolls in the first place, that there was more people using it, then you'll see people of every income using it. So if you really want to talk about equity, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Vasquez. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you so very much, Raquel Vasquez, Mayor for the City of Lemon Grove here and Vice Chair of the Audit Committee. I just want to thank Mayor Salas for bringing her concerns forward. And I noted them here regarding overhead and cost, but also investments, and that it's timely, but also what Councilmember Shu shared about everything being equitable. And so I support the opportunity to support it. To explore strategies that are reasonable, but also achievable, that can be incorporated into the audit plan. I do believe that it should be timely. I think the more information that we have and we share with each other, we can make better decisions as a board. And so those are my comments. Again, I support this opportunity to explore strategies that are reasonable and achievable on behalf of the Audit Committee.
Okay, well, thank you. Great, so we have concluded our business for today. And our upcoming meetings, just to note, we are scheduling a meeting for April 30th to ensure that we have enough time to get through all of our business before we consider the draft regional plan on May 28th. So our next meeting is April 9 at 9 a.m. We will see you then, and we are adjourned.